Listen, you smell something?
Human emotions are materializing in the form of a viscous psychoreactive plasm with explosive supernormal potential.
What a discovery, a psychoreactive substance.
Do you know what this equipment is used for?
Boggle or Super Mario Brothers?
We'll have fun!
Yeah! They're still doing it. Really quite good work there.
My friend, don't be a jerk.
We've got no choice. Call the Ghostbusters.
Super Jackpot!
Welcome to Extraplasm Podcast. It's the only podcast on the internet that believes Home Depot stores need to begin selling a 12-foot tall Statue of Liberty figure to help properly celebrate Halloween and the Season of Evil. And of course, you can reuse it again at New Year's Eve, too. I'm your host, Jim Maritato, aka Fake Maniac on the internet, and I'm excited to be bringing you episode 55 of Extraplasm. This week, we're talking with artist and Ghostbusters superfan Richi Crypt from all the way across the sea in the United Kingdom. Richi is a lifelong Ghostbusters fan whose self-published comics and Ghostbusters portrait commissions are well known among the Ghostbusters fandom, and he's been an avid supporter of Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed since it launched, as well as an avid supporter of pretty much everything Ghostbusters. We chat about Ghostbusters fan culture, his experiences as a self-published Ghostbusters artist, our mutual appreciation for Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed and Ghostbusters video games, and our hopes of video game content to come, and much more. And I was really excited to be able to talk with Richi finally because we've never really had the chance to get to know each other one-on-one, although we've been in crossing paths with each other a few times in different Ghostbusters oriented discords and in social media, etc. At different points over the last year, we've talked about doing an episode, but never really quite made it click. So I'm excited that we finally got to do it and to share that conversation with you this week. But before we get into that conversation, we need to talk about a couple housekeeping items. And of course, Ghostbusters headlines. So my first big housekeeping item I want to talk about for a few moments has to do with spoilers and leaks. I want to offer up a quick clarification for folks this week as we begin to see content marketing the next Ghostbusters film. The podcast's policy has generally been, no leaks, no spoilers. But what I really mean by that, and I want to make sure we're all clear on, is that the policy moving forward is no leaks, but officially sanctioned content from Ghost Corps and Sony is fair game for discussion. Now, the reason I'm raising this concern and sort of reiterating this at the top of the podcast this week is that Ghostbusters headlines this week includes a discussion of a TikTok video from a social media influencer who visited the Ghostbusters Firehouse set in the UK and who was granted an opportunity to shoot a few videos to promote the new Ghostbusters VR game, as well as the franchise and film in general. And to be clear, this was definitely video content approved by Sony marketing, with the Ghostbusters accounts on social media helping to share it, commenting on it, etc. So we don't have a trailer at this point, but it's very likely we're going to continue to see the franchise get marketed out to different demographics than, frankly, us, the traditional Ghostbusters fans, via different, influencers, folks who have followings who, we want to see potentially be exposed to Ghostbusters and take it up as something they want to go and check out. And so at the same time, there's a video game that's being released this week for Ghostbusters VR, and they apparently had Ghostbusters VR on the set for folks to try and use who were there for influencer visits. So it's likely we may see some more content that's going to come out in the next few days. Who knows? Even if it's not a trailer. So I sort of want folks to be aware of this, that you're probably going to see some more set visit videos that come out. We are going to talk about them on the podcast. If that's not something that you're comfortable about because you want to stay completely and 100% spoiler free, I would ask you to consider that this is no different than talking about if they put out a trailer, because it's marketing information that's put out, that's sanctioned. And so the policy moving forward is if it's not sanctioned by Sony, we're not going to talk about it. So again, no leaks allowed. But if it is sanctioned, there's a really good chance we will talk about it. And if you don't want to know about it, I'm going to let you know that we're going to address something and kind of give you a quick spoiler warning. But just be aware that the podcast is going to start to talk more about particulars and details that might come out from these influencer videos to begin to kind of chat about what is this movie going to be. If we had a trailer, I would be kind of happier to be able to talk about what the story looks like and who these characters might be. But so far, we're going to get sort of drips of information about forthcoming Ghostbusters products, it seems, especially if we sort of think about how the discussion of Hasbro went last week and the discussion of how that's being dripped out to us. So if we want to be invested as fans and talk about what's happening, we're probably going to need to talk about some social media videos. And so if that's not something that's your bag, I will let you know when it's going to happen in the podcast so you can kind of make some jumps ahead or skip ahead or scrub ahead, 3 minutes or 15 minutes or however long it's going to be that we talk about the thing. So just be aware of that. The second thing I want to talk about real briefly is the idea of not reporting on rumors. I had several people reach out to me in the last week to ask me why I was not discussing the potentiality of a trailer screening at the Show East convention or trade show happening in Florida this week. This is a trade show that happens for exhibitors of films, meaning people who own theaters. And essentially, this is not that different from CinemaCon, where we saw Ghostbusters Afterlife be screened to potential exhibitors in Las Vegas before it came out. But this is a different convention and a smaller convention, and one that if you looked at the schedule of it, even a week ago, I would have told you that Sony was going there to market some products that they were targeting towards Latin American audiences, as well as having a screening of a film that's forthcoming called Journey to Bethlehem, which is essentially a pop cultural music revival of the story of Mary and Joseph and their attempt to find a place to have the baby Jesus. You'll probably see that in theaters this holiday season. So why didn't we talk about this potentiality for a trailer? Because there was no indication of any evidence of it. It was entirely a rumor that began somewhere, potentially a web forum, and then began to be elevated by a few different media outlets or social media accounts, etc., within the fandom. When there's no evidence of a thing, I'm generally not going to report on it as news. And I say that not because I'm calling anybody out who did report on it. There are some folks who really firmly believe that there was going to be some likelihood of a trailer. But when there's not evidence of something, it's not something I'm likely going to turn around and say we should talk about and sort of utter into existence. And so if you reached out to me this week and you kind of messaged me and said, why aren't you talking about this? And I didn't answer you back. It's because you were probably the fifth or sixth person to message me. And I didn't want to make the same explanation to say, hey, we don't report on rumors on Extraplasm. And I'm going to hold to that. Do we speculate on Extraplasm? Sure. Do we talk about like what might come out or what Hasbro might release next? Absolutely. But I'll be honest, I've been wrong several times in the last few weeks. I firmly believe we were going to see a Hasbro release back in July because Entertainment Earth, had sort of posted something on a calendar suggesting that there would be an announcement, and then there wasn't. And it turned out that, I got very hyped up about a Hasbro announcement that was an announcement for an announcement. We talked about this last week. So rather than kind of run, sort of without reason to start reporting on things just because it's exciting to speculate and begin hyping those things as potential fact or misunderstanding for folks who are reading social media, Extraplasm is going to continue to kind of take a step back and let us process information. If you haven't seen me post something on social media about a thing that happened in a given week in Ghostbusters world, don't worry. I probably will talk to you about it, but it might be on Tuesday. And that opportunity to kind of wait until Tuesday will give us more time to process what's going on, to look to see whether or not there's evidence of things that are going on before we kind of just run with them and hope that they're true. So I hope that kind of clarifies things in terms of where we're at on what leaks are, what spoilers are, what rumors are, and how we're going to handle them moving forward. And of course, if you have anything you want to share with the podcast that you feel is legitimate or that you are excited about, you can of course always still pass that along to me via Extraplasm on Instagram or X. You can find me, of course, on Extraplasm Podcast on Facebook and via email at extraplasompodcast@gmail.com. So this isn't my way of saying don't reach out if you have something to share, but let's just make sure the things we're sharing have some legitimacy to them so that we're not uttering things into existence that maybe aren't true and just kind of potentially create headaches for folks who are trying to market the franchise and market things within it. Okay, so with that kind of declaration of the state of the podcast out of the way, let's move into talking about some Ghostbusters headlines.
Still making headlines all across the country, the Ghostbusters are at it again.
Today, the entire eastern seaboard is alive with talk of incidents of paranormal activity.
Phone-in topic today, ghosts and ghost busting.
Extraplasm, read all about it. Ghostbusters headlines coming at you.
In Ghostbusters headlines this week, like I said, the big news in official sense is about this social media post that came out this week showing us a glimpse of the Ghostbusters Firehouse set. If you don't want to hear about that, you may want to skip ahead about 6 or 7 minutes in this conversation because, that's what we're going to talk about for a few minutes. Okay, so the big reveal that we saw this week is that apparently there's a slime blower on the set of Ghostbusters Firehouse. Now, Is it in the movie? Who knows? But we do know that there was a social media influencer from TikTok from the UK whose name is Henry Calvert. And he went to visit the set and essentially was in a flight suit and was given an opportunity to do a whole bunch of different things, it seems. These are TikTok videos, so of course they're each less than 1 minute long and feature lots of montage. But it's very clear that he had an opportunity to make some slime on set, to hang around Ray's occult video and be outside of it and essentially film in front of it, to be outside the firehouse and film in front of it. And at one point to begin spraying down a dummy with a working slime blower that didn't have a pack connected to it, but did have the nozzle connected to a hose blowing pink slime. So does that mean that there's going to be a slime blower in the forthcoming Ghostbusters movie? Who knows? It could entirely be a situation where they had a slime blower there as one of the interactive things that influencers who visited the set for these kinds of videos had an opportunity to do. It's very clear that PlayStation 5 VR thing was set up for Rise of the Ghost Lord for folks to try out there as well. So there were a whole bunch of different interactive things and activations that influencers seem to be able to do if they're invited to the set. And it's not clear how many people were invited to the set to do these kinds of things. But the point is that, does this mean it's in the movie? No, maybe, who knows? This is part of the speculation thing where we don't want to make it a rumor that yes, the slime blower is in the movie. But if it is kind of interesting to consider, they brought all this equipment all the way to the UK. That you would think that they weren't going to bring much with them that they didn't intend to use for some productive reason. So potentially there's a slime blower in the movie. I heard some funny things in response to this. I heard some folks suggest that this proves that Ghostbusters 2 is canon because there's the contingent of folks in the fandom who are concerned that Ghostbusters Afterlife somehow made Ghostbusters 2 not canon. So if you're one of those people, feel confident that now the slime blower is still in existence and Ghostbusters 2 is canon. But, this is just hype. It's kind of hype about what's coming out with the next movie. We don't have no idea. This video doesn't really tell us anything. I think everybody's very excited and we're all waiting for a trailer. We're waiting to know what the title of this movie is, so we're willing to chase down any piece of information we can right now about Ghostbusters. And so the appearance of the slime blower is a very big deal. But, to be in reality, is it really in the movie? We'll see. Is it exciting, though, that there's people who are, beginning to market things and kind of promote their set visits, and that potentially those are things that are being greenlit as we get closer and closer to a trailer? My answer to that question is yes. I'm very excited to potentially see a trailer coming soon. Don't know if it's going to happen before the end of the month, and at this point, my guess is no. But I am stoked that we're at least starting to see some of the marketing ramp up, even if it's happening in a different way than we might normally expect, because it's happening through these drips of influencer videos and what have you. So that kind of gives you the idea of what's going on with the official news about Firehouse this week. Essentially, there's a viral video. Go take a look at it if you want. If you want to find a quick way to get there, go to Ghostbusters News, because Jason Fitzsimmons has the video featured as well, or the videos, because it's more than one. You can click right through his link to the influencer in question, Henry Calvert's TikTok page, which I don't remember right now because I'm not on TikTok. And you can also read his coverage and breakdown of what's in each of these videos. Let's talk for a few minutes then, since there's no other official news to promote yet, because there's still no trailer and still no title name, about some Ghostbusters video game news that's pretty official. It was a really big week in Ghostbusters video games because the Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed Ecto Edition dropped, and it has completely changed the game that we had out there already. Ecto Edition expands the Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed sort of ecosystem out from just the existing ecosystem of Xbox, PlayStation, and PC via Epic Games to adding PC players via Steam, and probably more importantly, the entire ecosystem of Nintendo Switch. And so you now have virtually every gaming console and platform on the planet has access to Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, which is very exciting. But in addition to opened up access, the new DLC provided a ton in terms of new content and new experiences. There's a new story mode that you can access that introduces Sam Hain from the real Ghostbusters as a character in this narrative. And it's not just like some new story that features, some voice actors coming in to play ancillary characters, but Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson were back for his voice performers for this, which is pretty cool. There's 2 new levels, including a subway station that looks like it was taken straight out of New York City, and an indoor amusement center with a laser tag, arcades, bowling alley, restaurants, etc. And like I said, Sam Hain's been introduced in the story, but he's also a playable ghost who's an entirely new overlord class that can't possess items anymore, but can create catalysts to spawn new rifts, as well as leverage PKE and hauntings that are happening around him. He's able to resist tethering a lot easier because he can't possess things, but it means that he's able to put up a fight. And so it's kind of changing the way in which ghost battles will work in that game. The game also introduces ghost bounties, meaning that you can now go and say that you want to take a team of people to go chase down a specific ghost to earn XP and designate its level of experience and create customizable private matches in ways you couldn't before. There's character and loadout slots. So as opposed to having one character design and one set of weaponry that you can decide to use with it, you can now switch between these things, and you can even change loadouts during matches, which is really cool. So if you find out you're in a match with a player who's using a ghost that you're not well equipped for, you can go back to the gear cart and change out not just the secondary weapon you have, but your actual loadout to be better armed to fight against the particular ghost in question. There's also new tenure levels, including new cosmetic unlocks that are exclusive to those who've tenured up to level 5, and some gear shells that you can unlock that allow you to essentially carry around gear that looks like it's been made out of cardboard, including the cardboard boxes that the real Ghostbusters toys came in when you were a kid, which is pretty amazing. And so there's a lot in the DLC. I'm not going to continue to talk too much about it here because Richie and I get into it pretty in depth for almost like an hour of the conversation this week. And so rather than kind of run through stuff here very briefly and then retouch upon the same things later, I'm going to sort of put a pin in the discussion of the DLC here. But I do want to say this. If you haven't tried Spirits Unleashed, or you tried it earlier and you gave up on it because you're like, this isn't for me, Ecto Edition completely changes like what you've been playing before or what you haven't played yet. It's really amazing, and for the low cost of like entry of like $19.99 for the Switch edition, and probably the same to download for Steam or for Epic Games, like there's a no-brainer here. Like for $20 you can get a better experience than most like things that you could buy for $20 as a game. Like that, to me, I look at that as like a bargain bin price for a game, as opposed to something that you're going to get 4 different DLCs worth of content that have happened and all of these new features that have been unlocked. So if you're not playing Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed from IllFonic, please, like by all means, give this a shot, because even if you're somebody who played it before, you're going to find so much new and amazing content in there to check out. Beyond the news we've got about IllFonic's Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, I want to remind folks that the new VR game, Rise of the Ghost Lord, will be dropping this week on the 26th. That's why you saw some promotional video for that from an influencer that came out on TikTok, of course. But you know, that's a pretty interesting project that's coming out for the MetaQuest systems and PlayStation VR. And the MetaQuest 3 has an exclusive mini puffed game that we've talked about in the past, that there's been some video footage that's come out on the Ghostbusters account and the Sony VR account on Instagram. So if you want to take a look at those 2 accounts, you can. You should also know that if you're into that VR game and you want to find out more about it or start to get involved in a community with it, there is a link to a new Discord for that game that you can find on the Ghostbusters and Sony VR Instagram accounts for sure. And they may be on the Facebook accounts too. I'm not 100% sure of the URL of that off the top of my head, but maybe I'll link to it in a story on Instagram that you can look for later on this week when the game launches. Okay, so that kind of wraps things up for us in terms of video game news for this week. So let's talk for a few minutes about merchandise. Ghostbusters merch news includes this week the reveal of a Gozer statue to go along with the 4 Ghostbusters that we've already know are coming from Premium Collectible Studios. Those you may recall are the really high-end figurines and statues that are being put out, each with a different Slimer, and that are running about $700. The Gozer figure is going to, based off concept drawings that were put out by Aunt Adams, who's the CEO of PCS. The Gozer figure will apparently feature the temple's stone staircase, and we'll have her standing in front of it. It's not clear if there will be like a pack-in for this, the same way there's a Slimer pack-in for the deluxe figures, or what's going to differentiate between a standard and a deluxe Gozer figure. But these are pretty cool drawings so far. The PCS figurines are really nice looking, and you may recall that this is the same company that was producing a Ray Stantz figure that people were not so keen and hot on, and they took the feedback and decided to go back to the sculpt and the paint and fix it, and that they've now released images that look way better. I've said the price point is way too high for me because I can't afford to spend $700 a figure, but if you're a high-end figurine collector, this looks like it's going to be a line that doesn't just stop necessarily at the Ghostbusters, but potentially may include Gozer as well. So if you want to see those images, you can take a look at them pretty quickly by going to Ghostbusters News. Jason's got them linked there, and you can sort of get filled in a bit about what's going on with the PCS line. Beyond PCS releasing things this week that we may not have expected, Star Ace, who we've talked about previously, is having a Ghostbusters license to produce a Stay Puft figure, is now going to also be releasing a Slimer figure. The pre-order for that is now available, and there's a regular edition and a deluxe edition. The deluxe edition of Slimer comes with sausages, apparently, that's just that he can put in his mouth, as well as he's got a base that he goes on that will then allow him to be LED lit. I guess the deluxe version will be cast out of some sort of translucent vinyl, whereas the regular version will not, so it won't light up. The price point on this and differentiation is really simple. It's like $20. And these are available through the Star Ace website for pre-order, as well as BigBadToyStore.com. If you want to pre-order directly from Star Ace, you can go to their website at starace.com.hk, because they're based in Hong Kong. These figurines look pretty cool. It's going to be about 8.5 inches tall, although I will say this. I don't think this is the best sculpt of Slimer I've ever seen. I still think Phantasm Toys and their Slime Ball figurine really still takes the cake on that. But this is a pretty nice figurine, and I'll also say that we don't see the backside of this figurine in the current renders. We only see the front, so I'm sure that we'll be waiting to hear what Jason Fitzsimmons at Ghostbusters News has to say about this particular Slimer's booty, and whether or not it fits the bill of being an officially licensed Slimer. But I digress a little bit, but I do mean this too. I kind of agree. If your Slimer doesn't have a big old butt, then is it really Slimer? So if you're out there, Star Ace, turn that figurine around. Let us see the back. But it is a pretty decent looking Slimer beyond that. It's got a Q4 release this year, as does the Stay Puft. And again, you can pre-order it now at either Big Bad Toy Store or Star Ace's website. In unofficially licensed merchandise news, Dixon Flannel has announced that they have a new Ghostbusters-inspired design that's come out in the last week. The blue, green, black, and purple plaid pattern that they've got on the shirt essentially mimics the shirt that Peter Venkman is wearing at the beginning of Ghostbusters during the scenes when he's around the firehouse bickering with Janine, as well as when he goes to investigate Dana Barrett's apartment and look around in her fridge. So this is a shirt that I don't really think anybody's ever really made as a replica. And to be fair, it's not an exact replica of the shirt that Venkman wears, but it is a pretty spot on, pretty like look-alike to the pattern, and something that doesn't scream Ghostbusters if you want to wear it to work, because the only place that you'll see a Ghostbusters tag is on the inside underneath the collar, where you'll find a Venkman name tag as well as an image of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. So if you're looking for something that is low-key Ghostbusters that you can justify buying and wearing, you can go over to Dixon Flannel's website. The address for that is Dixon.com, Dixxon.com, and you can find the shirt for $49.99 in both men and women's designs and sizes. So that about wraps up the headlines segment for this week and covers the different merchandise releases for the most part. But there's one thing I always like to tell you at the end of it, which is what you can go look at this week that would be kind of fun just to kind of, waste some time while you're on your lunch hour at work or something. So a couple things to go take a look at. Head over to Ghostbusters News if you haven't already and take a look at Jason Fitzsimmons' video reviewing the Terror Dog costume from HalloweenCostumes.com. This is a fun video where he went out of the house and met some terror dogs who apparently tried to possess him. And apparently the incident may have gotten a little humpy. So you can go watch a goofy video of Jason reviewing the Terror Dog costume from HalloweenCostumes.com, because that costume has looked ridiculous and funny as hell since they first announced it, and it does not disappoint in being exactly that, and the video is great. You can also go over there and find his video coverage of First to 11, the cover band. They did their new rendition of Ghostbusters, the original Ray Parker Jr. song. And so it's a pretty cool new video, a new take on the song. If you want to go listen to one more rendition of Ghostbusters you haven't heard yet, you can head over to Ghostbusters News and find that as well. Okay, with all of our headlines covered, let's go now to my conversation with Ghostbusters fan and artist, Richi Crypt. Joining me on Extraplasm podcast for the first time and all the way from across the pond or the ocean or the pool, whatever you want to call it, as a giant body of water, Richi Crypt, artist, illustrator, awesome person, and super Ghostbusters fan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's Saturday night, and I'm feeling all right.
It's Saturday night for you because we have this weird 8-hour time difference.
Yes.
I'm trying to think like how many international guests there have been, if you don't count Canada. Because I mean, to be fair, Canada's international, but it's also hat. Like, no, I won't say if it's a hat, it's a cool hat. Because I'm always like, hat,
yes,
Canadian people are awesome. The folks who come on the show, and I think it's kind of funny because like the last 2 weeks I was saying that there was a Canadian block. There was like Chris Stewart was on the show, and then Jason Fitzsimmons is on the show. So now we're just like, okay, let's take it back to the motherland. We're just going to shoot back over to to Europe and figure out how to get back to the people who sent us all over this continent. Yeah, whatever. But I'm glad you're here. It's good to finally get to talk to you and meet you like kind of one-on-one because we've kind of orbited in each other's circles, I think, for a while.
Yeah. A few years now. Yeah.
Yeah, like we've kind of crossed paths, and I think we've ended up at some points in the same discords for Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed and things. But like, and we would message each other like, hey, this is a cool thing, like once in a while, but like we've never really sat down and talked. Yeah. So I'm excited about it. So yeah. And I'll also say this. I talk to so many people who, whenever I say your name, they go, oh, I have a cool thing that I commissioned. and then they send it to me.
Over 350 Ghostbusters portraits are out there in the wild somewhere. So
it's amazing. It's so funny. There are so many of them. And because like every time I say your name, that's like no exaggeration. In the last week, I have probably received like 10 of your pieces of art of people I know because I said, hey, guess who's going to come on the show next week? And they're like, oh, cool. Look. So,
yeah. And some of them I don't even remember doing. So I'm like, wow, that's a good one. Cool.
Wow, that guy does art like me. Oh, wait.
Yeah, that guy looks familiar. But yeah.
That's where you'll find out that you'll start accusing things of being AI art that stole from you. And in reality, you'll just be you.
I've seen people try and do it. Try and do Richi Crypt via AI, and it does not look anything like me.
Oh, I
think I'm safe. Safe.
But your artwork is amazing, and it's really something that's respectable and folks really appreciate. So I'm excited to talk with you about it because you're kind of a big deal.
I hate that, but thanks.
Look, we figured out where the Canadians inherited it from.
A big deal. Okay.
I'm saying that. I say that with total love, but I joke about this that when folks come on the show who are from Canada, I will give them compliments and they are very quick to go, no. And you're like, what is this cultural thing of just refusing to accept being good at stuff?
I mean, I don't know.
It's odd.
It is
it's
strange.
Fun though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to talk with you a bit about kind of your art, like where you kind of got into it. What's your background? Like, how did you become involved in drawing and illustrating?
So it's pretty simple. So when I was about 5, somebody bought me one of the Marvel Real Ghostbusters comics, and I started drawing, and I just didn't stop. And I've been doing it since.
Is that like the thing you learned to draw first? Like you were
yes.
Like, okay.
Definitely. It was like I could draw. And people have said it about the Patreon comment. They're like, wow, you can just knock, because I stream it sometimes. People are like, wow, you can just knock that out in like 15 minutes. And I'm like, yes, Real Ghostbusters is pretty easy. I don't have to get any likenesses right. It's like, bam. Nah, yeah. So I am Ghostbusters 100% learned, taught, everything.
Did you end up going to school for illustration, like for art, or so you're just all self-taught? right?
Or just self-taught. I did a bit of a stint when I was about 16. I did some inking for some like actual professional comic artists in the UK.
Yeah.
And they were like the old men in the room, like all smoking and saying, don't do that, do this, stop doing that. And like just being mean to me. And I just kind of learned that way. But yeah. That's my education is Ghostbusters.
So trial by fire and self-teaching, right? I love it.
Pretty much.
That's kind of awesome. I think it's funny because I think about doodling. Like, I'm a doodler. I will never say that I'm good at drawing. I will never say that I could produce a piece of art that anyone should ever own that I drew, because I'm not good at drawing, but I am a decent doodler. But I find that it's all in this weird muscle memory of like things I drew as a kid. If I'm sitting in a meeting at work, the first thing that goes down on a page for some reason is Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yes. Yeah, I drew a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog as well. Until I got the internet and Googled Sonic, I was like, I'm never drawing Sonic again. Oh no.
But yeah, no, I do that. I start with the nose. I got to draw the oval.
You got to draw the nose first. You got to draw like the little mouth
eyes
bit
out.
and the eyes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, but but that's kind of fun because it's like it starts for you as a childhood thing, and from there it's just kind of a thing you keep growing and developing as a skill. Like I can tell a deeper story. I can draw a more detailed thing the longer I keep doing this. It's kind of
that's it. Yeah, I was talking to people about it the other night, and they were like, "Oh, how do I get into comics?" And I was like, "Well, you make bad comics. And you draw bad art. That's what you do. That's going to be your first couple of comics. They're going to be bad. Just keep doing it.
Oh my god, it's
and then
true.
They'll get better."
I remember being a kid and checking out books from the library that were like Stan Lee's Guide to How to Draw Comics. And somehow after the 30 days of having that book in my, lending library, I wasn't able to draw comics.
No.
Just looking at that book didn't work. I actually had to sit down and try to draw them. But yeah, that's kind of fun. I like the idea that you kind of still have a connection and a passion to what you were doing as a kid. I don't think there's that many people who can say that, as a thing they've chosen to do as a profession, as a thing they've chosen to do as like a part of what they do for a living, that they get to do the same thing they enjoyed doing. Just the pure joy of being a child and drawing is something that's kind of very cool and very unique. So congrats to you for that.
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky. I sometimes joke about like somewhere there's a monkey's paw that's just closed as a fist, because I was just like, I want to draw Ghostbusters for the rest of my life. And it happened. But yeah. I mean, I do draw other stuff, sort of like other comics other than Ghostbusters. But every time I'm doing it, I'm always like, I wish I could draw some Ghostbusters.
Yeah, it seems that you always come home, right? Like you'll dabble in other things, but you come home. Yeah,
it's the well where all the ideas are for me, anyway.
What drove you sort of to turn around and say, I want to do this as a career track, though? Like, I guess from like moving from being a kid who loves drawing, what became the turning point? Where did you go? I know I want to do this and do it professionally.
I don't know. I think it's always been the plan. That's always what's been in the back of my head. From like when I saw the very short documentary that Rolf Harris's Cartoon Hour or whatever it was called put out called Slimer Won't Do That. And it's like a behind the scenes of the real Ghostbusters. Rolf Harris is a terrible person. You shouldn't look up into him. Very bad man. But he had a kids show back in the day. And they talk to Dan and Harold and all this sort of stuff and going behind the scenes of the real Ghostbusters. And I was just like, wait, hang on. People could draw this and that's their job. So I think ever since then, I was like, that's what I want to do.
Okay. Yeah.
And every other job I've had since, and I've had a lot, because I'm not very good at taking directions, unless it's Ghostbusters. Like every other job has just been like the side job to the comics and the Ghostbusters art.
Gotcha. So this kind of became a thing where you went, this is what I'm going to do. It's what I meant to do. And you kind of got turned on to this early on of like, well, this is a possibility. So let's just keep doing it. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Unless, over my dead body, I will keep drawing Ghostbusters.
I will admit that if I had been that passionate, followed through on my dreams in that way at an early age, I wouldn't have a podcast, and instead I'd have an ice cream truck. Because as a child, I was mind blown by the idea that a person could just sell ice cream from a truck for money. Like that was like, what? I could do that. I could be an ice cream man. I like ice cream. I know a lot about ice cream. How hard could it be? Drive a car, drive a truck, and hand out ice cream to kids and take money. But that's a very different thing. It doesn't really require building a lot of skill. And we're becoming.
I don't know enough about ice cream to be able to comment on that.
Well, as an ice cream truck driver, I think it's less about knowing much about ice cream and knowing more about driving. And
that's probably true. But I don't want to disparage any ice cream men out there.
Yes, I do.
I'm angrily.
All of you who are ice cream men, you are all insufficient. We need ice cream women to take all your jobs. And
when I used to smoke, I loved the ice cream man because they sell cigarettes over here. So I'd hear that like Popeye the Sailor theme go past and I'd run up and please give me some.
That's so funny. I can remember buying candy cigarettes from the ice cream man here, but I never bought actual cigarettes from the ice cream man. So
yeah, it's just like, I'm just following through from the real Ghostbusters. As a kid, I bought the real Ghostbusters candy cigarettes from the ice cream man. And as an adult, I bought the real ones.
Did they really have real Ghostbusters candy cigarettes in the UK?
Yeah.
No way.
And you got like you pulled them out and it's a pack of cigarettes. It had like Egon or whatever on the front, or like the stock ghosts that they had.
Yeah.
It's a blue packet and they were really dusty. So you could smoke them and blow.
Right.
And it looked like smoke would come out. But yeah, it was weird things.
We had those same kind of candy cigarettes, but they weren't branded like with a cartoon. And I imagine if they had done that here, somebody would have flipped the lid because people were already flipping the lid. Yeah, no, agreed. That's kind of crazy. Like that's because at the time I could think about how people were very upset about like how commercializing kids' toys during cartoons was bad. And people were beginning to question whether or not Fred Flintstone should be selling vitamins.
Well, yeah. And also saying that, we were talking about the old real Ghostbusters masks last night, me and Ghostosaurus, and he said something that flashed me back. It's like, I wasn't allowed to wear a mask because there was something about masks suffocating kids. Like
yeah.
In the zeitgeist for a while. I was like, oh yeah, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah. That was like a weird, like, check your kid's candy because it's full of drugs and needles and whatever kind of urban legend thing, right?
And they're like, masks might suffocate kids. But my parents were like, yeah, don't wear a mask while smoking and drinking.
It's kind of funny how like the things that people were so concerned about for kids while they did the things they were doing as adults. And I think that's still true. I think that today we're even more concerned about kids and safety than we ever were. By the same token, we now have places in the US you can go to. I don't know if you have this over there, that you can go and you can drink and then you can throw axes at things.
Yeah, we have that here.
And I sit there and I go, this just seems like a liability lawsuit waiting to happen. Like
it's just called Manchester here. It's weird.
So you've been largely as a producer of comics and producer of art, you've been a self-published author for the most part, right? That's
yes.
For most of your career. So tell me a bit about that. Like what made you decide to, I get this understanding of why you went deep on Ghostbusters is a thing that's been there since you've been a kid. It's always been there as part of your art. What made you decide that it was just better to go self-publishing rather than to go other avenues or to kind of try to get into mainstream comic publishing?
I mean, don't get me wrong. If a mainstream publisher comes along, I'm going to say yes. Because I'm poor.
Yeah, I didn't mean to constitute that question that way. But like, at what point did you look at the mainstream comic industry and be like, "Fuck y'all"? But
well, it was kind of like I started noticing when the IDW books come out, which I love, that like Ecto 1 didn't look right, Primal Packs didn't look right, couldn't use any of the actors' likenesses. Right. I was like, oh, but wouldn't it be great if you could? And then I was just like, but no one's ever going to let you do that. So why not? I'll just do it myself. Really? Because I see your Descendants doll behind you. I'm very much like from the punk rock. I used to be in a punk band, so very much DIY. And I was just like, well, I'll just do it myself. And kind of like do the punk rock Ghostbusters and go that way.
Thank you also for spotting my Milo Ackerman plush.
Yes.
He's very valuable to me at this point. I got him a few months ago and he's bendable. You can pose it.
Oh.
He's a posable plush. Shout out to Agronautics who made that thing. It's awesome.
I also noticed your little shout out to Misfits in the Chris Stewart episode, and I am that is my band. Misfits and Black Flag were like where I got into it. So
yeah, I'm a huge fan of those bands, and they like make up a huge part of my life. And I think that DIY ethic or ethos is something that, you know, most fans of punk music kind of uphold throughout their lives. It's like a thing where even if you stop going to punk shows, like I admit at this point, I feel old when I go to punk shows. Like this is funny. You'll appreciate this as a fan of like Descendants and stuff. We went to go see the Descendants and here in California a few months ago, my partner and I. And so she took me to go see them. I was really excited to go. I didn't know I was going to be going because I thought the tickets were sold out and she had got the tickets. And I have seen Descendants play probably at this point, like, I don't know, 10 times in my life. I have a tattoo of All Roy from their other band. They are a huge thing for me. And as a person who's like an academic-y kind of person who teaches, but also finds that he really would rather often be doing DIY things, the band very deeply appeals to me because it's one of those things that runs deeply through their music because Milo Ackerman is a professor. And I don't really need to tell you this as much as I'm telling everyone else who's like, Jim, what are you talking about? But we went to go see Descendants, a band that, you know, was playing in dirty clubs in the 1970s and early 1980s and is kind of known for being amongst the old school punk rock scene. And we saw them in a venue where they had a small eatery where you could, for $30, you got
dinner and a show.
You got dinner and a show. You got for an extra $30, you got your own table and chairs, and they would give you your choice of entree. So I had an Impossible Burger and fries and sat and watched the Descendants. And I looked at my partner and I was like, dude, getting old is so fucking cool. She was like, what? That's like, I'm literally watching the Descendants perform on stage while I eat from a seat that I've been told is mine. No one else can have it. I can come back to it. I can go do what I want in return. And I don't have to worry about this. And I don't have to stand in the throngs of moshing people. I was just like, I'm so old and I love it. And then, of course, they played their song, When I Get Old, which the chorus of is, what will I be like when I get old? And Milo was losing his voice. So he, at the end of the song, he just went, this is what it's like when I get old. I was like, I love this. So sorry to derail into a story about Descendants on you, but
no, it's fine.
I think that whole DIY ethos you're talking about is something that does ring true for a lot of folks who are come out of punk music, out of punk bands. Kip Marshall, I know, has been working on the decals for the Ecto 1. And Justin West, who has been on, have talked about this a bit, you know, so it's one of those things that I think rings true for many of us who kind of are Ghostbusters fans and are in that Venn diagram of punk rock fans at the same time.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder what that's about. Like, why is it there's so many of us who are deeply in love with punk rock music?
Well, I think Ghostbusters is kind of punk rock anyway, you know.
Yeah.
Plus, like, there's the whole line in Afterlife about science being the punk rock of academia and all that sort of stuff. But like,
and that's what that line is like, such a huge payoff, right? For like those of us who sit in that weird Venn diagram of sort of DIY musicians and artists and, you know, makers and things. And in my case, like, you know, I make a podcast. That's my DIY effort. But I've always been one of those people who, even though I don't do it for a profession, like I was always a DIY. Let's Photoshop some graphics. Let's put together some MP3 files. Let's produce some content to go with a class I'm teaching and learn how to do it by hand. So I have a real deep appreciation for that. I think it's really great that, you know, I find a lot of the self-taught people in our community are people who I'm like, oh, I like you. You're cool.
Well, I think it's also like, much like the movie Ghostbusters, I just don't like being told no. And if somebody says no, it's a challenge. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. We'll see. You say no to me, I'm going to do it. So. Yeah,
I totally get that. Like, that's one of those things where people will say you can't do this thing, and as a result, you want to step up and go, well, challenge accepted. Like, let's see if you can, and maybe you can't
try
do it,
and stop me.
Yeah, right. Like, and there's so many. That is a fun thing to consider. Like the way that sort of DIY ethos permeates. It's not in an aggressive way necessarily of like, oh yeah, well, I'll show you, as much as it is.
It's not like that at all.
Well, what if you did it a different way than most people would do it and you could try and pull it off? Like, I'm reminded of this conversation I had years ago. I took a class once in stand-up comedy, and fun fact, if you want to do stand-up comedy, you should just go do it. You shouldn't take a class in it. But like the class I took, I got up and made a joke. And when I made the joke, I made a cultural reference to a supermarket chain where we lived. And the teacher of the class critiqued the joke and said, you shouldn't do that. You want your jokes to be universal. They should land everywhere you go. So you shouldn't make any local references. And I said, well, what if you just learned about the places you were going to beforehand and found out what the name of the supermarket chain was?
Yeah.
And he was like so incensed with me. He was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's not strategic and it's not this. And I was like, well, all I'm saying is just do something slightly different and you can still pull off the thing. And it kind of made me recognize in the moment that I was like, I don't really think I need to be in this class. Like, I think
it's like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And to be real, that person probably did know what they were talking about because they were a professional stand-up comedian, like, and they were a comedy writer and a whole bunch of stuff. But for them, they were like, no, this is the way the system works and the way it's done. And I went, well, but what if I did it a different way myself? Right? Like, yeah. What if you were to appeal to an audience and adapt to them as opposed to expect all you audiences to be universalized? Just, and to be fair, I don't have a career in stand-up comedy, but
yeah, but
I also didn't pursue one, but it was like in the moment.
I think you were right. The biggest cheer of the night at a lot of gigs is when the band goes, hello, Cleveland. And everyone goes, yeah.
And even if they get it wrong, even if they get it wrong and they're so blotto, everybody's so amused by the fact that the person's so blotto. Like if Fat Mike from NoFX was in Tacoma, Washington, and he got up and he was like, how's it going, Tulsa? Nobody would care.
No one would care. People would love it. People just love Fat Mike.
Yeah, even it doesn't matter what he does.
Yeah.
He's actually doing a series of like string orchestra shows now.
Yeah, I heard.
It's weird. Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I really want to go to his museum. But
he's doing them here. Yeah, the one in Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm it's on my list of things to do for sure, but for me it's a far quicker drive. It's like 5 hours. So for you it's like a lot more than that.
It's a weekend. Say that.
Yeah, it's a full day of travel just to get there. So, and then you're in Vegas, so you obviously have to just gamble because you're supposed to. That's what it's like required when you get there.
Yeah.
They say you can't stay in city limits unless you begin dumping money into machines. But I digress.
But I'm happy to do that. That's fine.
Well, now that we've deviated out of things we were talking about to fall over punk rock for 15 minutes or whatever, I should ask you, what are some of the distinct benefits you think, like out of self-publishing? Like, what is the best part of that for you, as opposed to being involved in a traditional publication model to put out the things you want to put out? What's beneficial for you about that?
I can do what I want. Any idea that comes to me, I can just go, okay. Like issue 2 of Something Strange is the Amityville Horror versus Ghostbusters.
Okay.
Which is something I thought of as a kid and was like, wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't this movie be better if the Ghostbusters turned up and dealt with it? And I was like, well, I can do that now. Why not?
I'm sorry, but my brain just shot off the minute you said that. My brain just shot off 5,000 little idea rockets at once.
Exactly.
It was like, what if the Ghostbusters were in this movie? What if the Ghostbusters were in that movie?
Yeah.
What if the Ghostbusters showed up in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? Like,
you could do that. I was like, one of the first things I wanted to do was Ghostbusters versus Poltergeist. And I was like, that's going to be real short. That's not going to, you wouldn't know it was Poltergeist because they're going to turn up, get a PK and go, oh yeah, it's here, shoot it. Done. All right, bye. Here's your bill. And it's like, but that's the joke with Ghostbusters, isn't it? You know, there's a horror movie situation.
It is kind of true, right? If Poltergeist was happening and the Ghostbusters showed up, that would be like an average call. That would not be like a world-ending affair. Like, this house is haunted. Okay.
Yeah, we know. Yeah. We could tell. And, you know, you'd have some like conversation where Winston's calming the family down, Peter's going through the fridge or something like that. And, you know, the characters, you know, you can put them in any situation. You kind of know what they're going to be doing. So it's fun to do that.
Do you like, this in general, do you like a good crossover comic? Is that a thing you're a fan of?
Sometimes. I kind of got a little bit annoyed towards the end of the IDW run when it was like Ghostbusters meet Hello Kitty or like Transformers and that sort of stuff. I was like, just get on, tell me a cool ghost story You know, that's what I want. I get like Transformers are doing crossovers with everything. And I did really like is it Contagion? Infection?
Yeah.
Like that kind of kicked off the whole Ghostbusters thing. I enjoyed that. But yeah, I'm just like, when I was a kid, it used to really annoy me when people would bring their toys over and I'd be like, why have you bought these toys? We're playing Ghostbusters. And they're like, well, my toy can be in the Ghostbusters. I'm like, no. It's clearly a different style and design. These aren't the same scale. No, He-Man can't be in Ghostbusters. So I do enjoy a good crossover, but yeah, it's got to be something special.
It's got to be something reasonable, right? Like, and
something
that's
that
to me,
fits.
like, if you're gonna bring your He-Man figures to come play with your real Ghostbusters figures, you need to bring Scareglow, right? Like, you need to bring.
He works.
Like, he works in that system, but like, you can't be like, yeah, Orko and Slimer are friends now.
No, please no. Oh. And they're like, yeah, but it's Slimer with a tail. I'm like, no, never that Slimer.
So one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking about putting people in different movies, or putting Ghostbusters in different movies or different contexts in that way, was I started thinking about the Doctor Who comics and the Doctor Who crossover comics. And like, I think the one that for me that I was like, I want to read this, but it also makes no sense to me, was Doctor Who meets Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's just like
I can see it working.
the Enterprise encounters the TARDIS as a result of some sort of, temporal shift that happens, and probably I don't know. I've just completely lost the name of the thing that's in Star Trek that makes time travel happen. There's some particle. It's going to come back when we're done podcasting, and then I'm going to be really mad about it.
The quantum
I don't
thing,
like when
you have to slingshot around the sun. Yeah.
Well, there's all kinds of ways, right? I think the most recent one, I was watching a Deep Space Nine episode recently where there was Chemosite that was inside the Ferengi ship, and they went to go take Nog to the Academy, and as a result of a space phenomenon, the Chemosite caused some nonsense, and they went back to the 1940s. And
yes, I do remember that episode. Yeah.
The Ferengi crashed at Roswell, New Mexico, right? So yeah, but like, there's all kinds of like the Doctor Who stuff to me was kind of funny because it was this weird thing I never would have imagined. Like, I think plenty of people are fans of Doctor Who and are fans of Star Trek, but I don't think most people conceptualize those two universes as ever kind of crossing in any way. Like the way that Doctor Who constructs its future is far different than the future of Star Trek. So when they came together, I was like, this is fun, but it also makes no narrative sense to me whatsoever. Like, because at no point in the history of Doctor Who has there been a discussion of the time period in which a galactic federation came up. Right, the Doctor Who's very good at being like, off in the future, billions of years from now, your planet dies and all the humans leave Earth and go off to other places in the universe. Whereas the Star Trek version of this is like, nah, we're always here. We build a space base and we defend it forever. And I went,
yeah, it's like we fix everything. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Right. How do you reconcile that? So, I mean, that's an example to me of like a comic crossover that I want to work, but doesn't, Yeah.
Yeah.
What's something that you'd say that you still have not done yet that you would want to cross over if you want to share it?
Gremlins.
Oh, that would be awesome. That's a great idea.
What happens when you hit a Mogwai with a particle thrower?
Don't hit the Mogwai.
No,
hit
not the Mogwai. No, never the Mogwai. I mean, the actual gremlin. Yeah.
The first thing that happens when you turn on a positron collider in front of a Mogwai is they go, bright light, bright light. That's the first thing that happens.
The second thing is they go pop. But yeah, I'd love to do a Gremlins, like a Christmas Ghostbusters Gremlins story.
That would be great.
I've got a few ideas, but yeah, and of course, Gremlins 2 is set in New York, so it kind of fits. So you can make those universes work.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so cool. It would be kind of cool if, like, not to be like, let me rate your story for you, but it's fun. We don't really know what the mythos of where the Gremlins come from is, right? Like, we just know that
they're Chinese.
Yeah, they come from a Chinese shop.
I didn't watch the new Gremlins series, to be fair. Not yet.
I didn't either. So if it's something in there that's canon, that's like the Gremlins come from a portal that goes to Gremlin Town, like, I don't know about that. But they come from Mogwai Village.
Which I think they might do from screenshots I've seen.
They're from Japan and they're from Magwai-do. It's right next door to Miyagi-do. I don't.
And they have to win the All Valley Championship.
Right. Well, there you go. There's another crossover. The Ghostbusters, in a karate tournament. And all of the other competitors are ghosts.
Ghostbusters meets Big Trouble in Little China could work. They both take place in the firehouse.
Yeah, so. You just got to draw the same firehouse. So what's the difference?
They got to open that shutter that goes down. It's
if the creative freedom is sort of what drives self-publishing and makes it worthwhile for you, what's the biggest challenge? Like, what is the hardest part about choosing to self-publish content as opposed to work with a publishing company?
The money, really. Because none of this stuff is free, you know.
Right.
It's all basically funded by Patreon, commissions, the shop, people buying the comics and everything like that. Without that, I can't keep doing it. I'll have to get a real job until they fire me and I go back to doing it. But, it's all just the money is the hardest part. That's the big challenge. And it really sucks because most of my money came from Facebook and it's recently been hacked. So I'm having to rebuild everything on Facebook again. I've lost a couple of thousand followers. It's just like, but the community is pretty good. And, you know, well, the community is great, to be fair. You're not going to find another community out there like the Ghostbusters community.
Right.
Most of the community is great. But, yeah.
Hey, that's true of all communities.
That is true.
I had this conversation recently where somebody was like, hey, you know, I won't even get into what the particulars were, but someone I was talking with who's a friend was like, you know, the Ghostbusters community has people who do blank, blank, and blank. And I was like, yes, so does the Star Wars fandom. So does the Star Trek fandom. Like, there's just people. Some human beings are just not great. They like the same things you do. They're just not great people. That's
it. You know, it's like, I've only recently gotten into Star Trek while I was drawing issue 3. I was just like, this Star Trek thing everyone loves. I'll throw this on, and got massively into it. And we are spoiled by the Ghostbusters community because the Star Trek community is a cesspit. Like, wow.
I am a deep Star Trek fan. And I really do love Star Trek to pieces. And if people ask me, like, what are the things in your life that pop culturally you need, like that you would just, if you couldn't have them anymore, if somebody said entertainment's over, you get to pick 3 things to keep from here on out, what are they? And it would be like Ghostbusters, Star Trek, and Doctor Who. Those would be the 3 things, like, pretty sci-fi wise. I would probably argue that I got to make a comedy selection and that it should be separate from those, and then we could have a debate about whether or not Ghostbusters is comedy or sci-fi or whatever. But anyway, in that context though, like, I think about fandoms. The Star Trek fandom is so damn old, right? It goes back to like the 1960s. Doctor Who is very similar, but Doctor Who's fandom is kind of different because I feel like it kind of is tied almost to a national cultural heritage. Like, very much so with Doctor Who, yes. And I hope that doesn't like over-assign that to you. You might not be a huge fan of Doctor Who, but
I mean, I like Doctor Who. It's you know, like you don't really have a choice when you're from the UK. You either grow up hiding behind the sofa, or you just don't watch it. So, and that's like a cultural reference that like is made. Like, everyone is hidden behind the sofa from the Daleks, and you're like, okay, got it. Like, the sea demons for me. Whew. Oh, okay, that's those interesting. Little discs on their hands. It's scary. Yeah, that's creepy. But that, to me, like, Star Trek is different in that, like, it was always a show that was designed for people who found themselves to feel intellectual and willing to challenge the norms of the present day, etc. It's always tried to dabble into philosophical debate in some way, and so it invites argument. It invites a sort of culture of deliberative back and forth and clash. Debate. Yes. I mean, that's the word I'm looking for. Debate. Except I'm trying not to use it, I guess, because I teach debate, and then I feel like I'm lecturing at you. No, that's so right. But yeah, I mean, debate, right? Like, it inspires a sense of healthy debate, and that means that you also get people who are not necessarily great at debating, not great at having difference, who show up and want to have it their way. And in some ways, like, I think the Ghostbusters community, we joke about how there's a lot of people who want
to deny one movie over another or to try and gatekeep or control what's going on. But I think that that's so much less true of our franchise than it is of something like Star Trek.
Oh yeah, Star Trek. Yeah, is yeah. I'm a Lower Decks fan. I don't know if you like Lower Decks, but I love and Strange New Worlds, which seem to be the two that really upset people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was like, oh, let's see what other people think about this episode. And like, well, no, let's turn the computer off and step away and never talk to anyone ever again.
But it is kind of interesting, right? Like what you're talking about in a way is like varying differences between audiences, right? And a sort of strange thing that like fandoms, they're not universal. Like people want to feel included in everything that a franchise does. And and that's why like it becomes like, well, is this or isn't this part of my fandom? Or can I define this as being outside my fandom because you like it and I don't? So I don't know. Like I guess do you feel that as an artist, is that part of the challenge of sort of maintaining an audience? Is like having to carve out like a particular version of Ghostbusters that everyone will like? Or do you instead say, I'm going to make a version of Ghostbusters that I like, and if you like it too, come support it?
Yeah, it's something I've definitely thought about because people are like, are you going to do anything with like the video game equipment? And I'm like, Ghostbusters, the video game came out. I know there's been a remaster, but like over 10 years ago now.
Oh yeah. It was 2009 and we're in 2023. So that's like,
yeah, it's like it's like
some crazy amount of years that I can't do in my head.
Yeah, no, I draw pictures. I don't do numbers. So like that's a barrier to entry for new people. So all the people that have come on with Afterlife, I don't want them to think like, well, I haven't played this video game from 2 generations back, and I don't know what you're talking about. So I was like, maybe I shouldn't do that. And like, because I do want it to be for everyone, but I also want it to be, I want it to be consistent with the world that the movies put out. And the video game does kind of mess with that a little bit. So like, yeah. I also kind of, at one point I was like, I don't want to do real Ghostbusters because it's too silly and everything goes out the window, which now having written 3 Ghostbusters books, I'm like, please let me do real Ghostbusters because there's so many rules with Ghostbusters.
I'm enjoying your October real Ghostbusters story a lot. So
thank you. I am making up as I go, so that I'm enjoying it as well. It's lots of fun.
Look, I'm not gonna spoil anything about that story for anybody, but there was a panel of Peter Venkman waking up next to an alarm clock that made me smile so much. I was so happy to see it. And if you're wondering what it is, folks out there listening, this is only a reason why you're going to need to go over to Richie's Discord. Which we'll make sure we tell you about by the end of the episode of where to get it. But how do you get to it? How do you get to a Discord if you don't have Discord installed? Is it like a URL?
I don't know. I think it is just a URL. Yeah.
So, but you've got your whole October project over there on your Discord, and if folks have not seen it, like you should totally go check it out because it is a real Ghostbusters story that's unfolding one panel or one page a day. It's not even like here's one image. It's like here's a whole page of comic book, and it's beautifully drawn. It's amazing. I love it.
Thank you.
So I can't wait to see the rest of it as it unfolds. But sort of coming back to this audience question, like part of the reason I asked you this is because when you say that the hard part is the money, right? I look at that as sort of like, okay, that's the hard part because that's about generating the revenue. But is that because the hard part is audience? Like, is it because you have to build that audience? You have to build that reach?
Yes. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I mean, I've always kind of like maintained that, I make no money off the comic itself. Like the ones that are sold, it covers the printing and it doesn't even cover the printing, to be honest. But like, I just want it to be out there for people to have and to enjoy. So, it is kind of like I need to reach out and meet more people and get more people excited about it. And I'm always trying to talk about it. If you see me on any of the other Discords, I'm like, hey, have you heard about this fresh new comic experience? It's like, oh, and when people ask questions like, what happened to the pink slime? I'm like, well, if you read issue 3, I kind of go into it. Like,
that's awesome.
You've got to be Peter Venkman all the time sometimes. That's how I kind of come at it.
Yeah, I think about this because it's like, as somebody who's self-publishing, you kind of have to put your name out there and get yourself established. And at this point, like you've done that pretty successfully. I mean, people know who you are without question in the fandom. And that's something where the minute anybody says your name, they can whip out pieces of artwork that they bought. And I think that's awesome. But I just think that that's one of those things that I feel is hard to accomplish. And I wonder for you, like, what do you think has been the most useful or valuable in kind of building out your community? Is it Discord? Is it like social media? What do you think is that you leverage best to be able to kind of create a community around your art?
I mean, it's probably the Discord. That is where most people who buy the comic end up.
Okay.
And then, they talk about it there. But like social media in general it's invaluable. It's the only way I get to do this is because I post about it and people see it and go, oh yeah, no, I'll check that out. That sort of stuff. No matter how much I shout about it on Spirits Unleashed, nobody's clicking any links there, so it's all.
I am.
I mean, like in the actual game, it's like, go read this comic.
Oh no, that is funny. You're like putting people in the trap on TeamSpeak and be like, by the way, go and find my Discord right now. Pause your game.
I like to do it when I get the angry people who are very angry at me, and they're like, you idiot, and I'm like, by the way, you can now read. Which makes them angrier, but they know where they can buy my comic.
You mentioned Patreon comic earlier, right?
Yes.
So you're making use of Patreon on a regular basis and putting out content?
Yeah. Patreon is, you can sign up for $1. That's all I ask. And you get basically everything, unless you want like t-shirts or like actual physical copies of the comics sent to you. You can read everything on the Patreon for $1. There will be a color version of the October comic going up on Patreon at some point. I'm in talks with colorists right now, so because I do want to do that, and hopefully also go to print as well. But it's the Patreon is also invaluable. It's paying the bills while I churn these things out.
Right. Because part of the reason I brought this up about like how do you build a community or what's the most effective thing is that I think that for independent publishing folks and like self-taught folks, the folks who are out there doing sort of making and creating as independents, there's a necessity to like embrace these models like Patreon. Like I was thinking about this recently, that what does the world look like for an artist, say, and you might be able to reflect on this 10 years ago, right? As an independent artist trying to figure out your revenue models versus now, where you actually have platforms that are explicitly set up for you to say, I'm cultivating a following and a community of people who enjoy my art and who are willing to sort of participate in that community every month, for a nominal fee. Like, how has that changed things for you, or has it changed things for you? Like, how have those tools kind of influenced or changed the way that the independent artist and the self-published artist operates?
So sort of like, it would have been more than 10 years ago now, but sort of like about 15, 20 years ago, I did an online webcomic, because that was the era of the webcomic, when sort of like Penny Arcade and all that sort of stuff were kicking off. I did a Ghostbusters webcomic called Ghostbusters Apocalypse, which ran for years. And it's sadly lost because the website died because social media took over and killed websites. And that was pretty much the way you did it. And I had like a Facebook set up as like a side thing, but people generally congregated on the website, and then everyone kind of moved over to Facebook, and I had to restart and was just posting like just doodles of like Ghostbusters stuff, and occasionally posting it in like the GB fans forum and that sort of thing. It's kind of gone from that to forums to Facebook. And it was a nightmare because there was no real way, unless you wanted to put something together and go on Kickstarter, which was just starting up as well.
Right.
Like that was the only way you could do it. There was no real ways of monetizing anything. Patreon was starting up, but it was mainly for like porn and that sort of thing. So you didn't really want to get close to that. And it was like, oh god,
only slime.
People have asked. I'm not gonna. And it was also like print on demand t-shirt sites like Spreadshirt, Redbubble were kicking off, and you did stuff that way, and you had to fight like, this looks kind of like a Ghostbusters logo, we're taking this down. Like, damn, okay, re-upload it and then do it that way. But yeah, it's a lot easier now where I can just go here, look, like Etsy is great.
Right.
I have a lot of problems with Etsy, but as a sort of like a shop platform, it's fantastic.
And because I think that's an interesting thing to consider about like how you've also got these new sort of platforms for selling product, right? That like Etsy is one that you can think of, but I mean, there's others. There's like, think about TeePublic, the things you can produce as a designer and have somebody else churn out, that you don't necessarily have to physically produce. But I don't know. I think that's kind of a fascinating thing to consider, that for those folks out there now, and especially for you as a self-publishing artist, that there's a big element of this. It's about creating community, right? It's about not just like, hey, I'm going to go out and put my art out there and hopefully somebody sees my bumper sticker that I made and they buy it out in the world, but rather that you have developed an audience of people who come back to you, who are looking at what your work does over and over and over again, because they are not just looking at you as, oh, this is a Ghostbusters comic I like, but this is a content creator and an artist whose work and works I appreciate over time. And so that's my way of trying to give you a compliment of saying like, you've done good at that.
Thank you. It's hard work, but I think I'm getting there. Yeah.
But I think that to me is what I admire in looking at what you've built out, is that I joked about at the beginning of how many people can wave around commissions, but it's because you've cultivated a long-term audience where people think about you as one of the members of the Ghostbusters fandom who's out there as a content creator, who's producing things, and who's not just there's a guy who's around us who also creates and draws cool art, but rather, no, like this is a content creator and a storyteller within our sort of fan universe. And so I think that's very cool. And I hope that you take it. I hope you take in how cool that is, because
sometimes it's sometimes when I'm living on like 75 pence rice a week, it's like it's hard to take in and you're hard to like appreciate. But I do appreciate it. Yeah, it is like it is great. The community has been great to me. It's been very kind to me. I've seen other people try and do similar things and not get it and not appreciate it, and it kind of then it comes back to bite them. I think that if you type in Ghostbusters webcomic, you'll find hundreds of failed attempts where people just didn't vibe with it and that sort of stuff.
Right.
And so I'm very, very lucky, because that could have easily happened to me.
I think that to some extent it has to do with authenticity. To me, like, you come across as an individual who's very passionate about not just making their art and not just getting paid for it, but creating relationships with people. And there's a level of authenticity to that is almost required if you're going to do what you do. And not to be like, I'm going to make more analogies to stand-up comedy that I don't do, but I look at podcasting, not for me, because I'm not out doing this as a tour or something, but podcasting in so many ways for so many different stand-up comics is about creating an ongoing audience who are then going to show up when you go to a city, right? Like there's how many different stand-up comics out there who have free Discords and free podcasts and free this and free that, because it's what allows them to cultivate a community around their work. And then when it's time to actually go show up in, Tallahassee, Florida, you've got your sort of built-in audience base who are going to come out also, not because like, oh, let's go see a comedy show because it's a comic, but let's go see this person who we feel like we have an authentic kind of parasocial relationship with. And I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, what is parasocial relationship? Like, is it real? Is it not? Because people now form far more meaningful relationships with, say, a podcaster, an artist, a Twitch streamer who they talk to, they send messages back to, and they have interactions back and forth, versus a talk show host from 20 years ago. Obviously, if you thought you were talking to David Letterman, you thought he was talking to you, then you needed to go talk to somebody for help.
Yes, right? Yes, you need help. Yeah.
But I think that's part of what I find fascinating about you, is that I have found you in so many places over time, right? Like any group I could go into, if it was a Discord, if it was GB fans, these different places, oh, there's Richi Crypt, right? Because you've done a great job of kind of going out, and as much as you're joking about selling art while putting people in the trap in a video game, like you have kind of created this, you need to do it, but you also have done it in a way that is palatable. Like people don't go, oh, is that guy trying to sell me art?
Yeah, well,
Right?
the thing is, it's like we were talking about sort of like Spirits Unleashed earlier, and I get three types of people in that game when I play. I get the people that hate me because they've seen me online and they think I'm something else, and I think everyone gets that. And then I get the people that just want to talk to me about Ghostbusters. And so like they'll follow me around. They won't play the game. They're just like, oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What's your opinion on this? Yeah. And I'm like, I'm trying to catch this ghost, please. Throw a trap. And
That's so funny.
and then I get the people who want to try and impress me and just stomp me into the ground. I'm like, yeah, cool. This is great. Thanks so much fun. But yeah, that's why I love the bounty system now, because I don't have to deal with it. But yeah, but people at the end of the day, they want to talk about Ghostbusters. They want to have conversations about Ghostbusters. And, you know, everyone's got their Ghostbusters story. Oh, I went to see it in this cinema and it's shut down now.
Right.
And then, oh, when I was a kid, I had this toy. And like, I think those are all as equally valid as anything I've got to say. And like, these part of people's lives, which is kind of something I wanted to tap into with issue 3. It's like, well, if you lived in a world where the Ghostbusters existed, you would probably have like very clear opinions on if you liked them or you didn't. But if you lived in New York around about that time, you would probably have a Ghostbusters story.
Yeah.
And issue 3 is all like people telling their version of a Ghostbuster. If they've worked with the
that's
Ghostbusters.
That's something strange, right?
That's something strange. Yes. Yeah.
Which is on your Etsy shop now, I believe.
Yeah, it's on the Etsy and the Patreon.
Nice.
I also managed to work in that horrible scene where Peter lets a ghost out just to mess with someone from I think it was in the original script and got cut and then ended up in the novelization. But yeah, I was like, I worked that in. So
yeah, I think the closest we got to that in the movie is that's okay. We can just put him right back in there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, what happens when they do that? You know,
right. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's very cool that you are this engaged with the fan community, and I mean, obviously, as an artist, you kind of have to be. But I would say that not every Ghostbusters artist out there is routinely involved in, you know, these different forums and different discussions. They're putting out art and they're building their platform on their social media, which is fine. It's not like judgmental or anything, but I appreciate sort of on the one hand, it's a bit of a hustle. On the other hand, it's not hustle like bad. I mean, like working hard.
Yeah, you gotta.
It's like you're hustling people with your art. You're telling them you're sending them original prints, original art, and then you're sending them like photocopies of old WoW comics or Now comics or whatever that's called.
Primeval, who's he?
That would be really screwed up if people got commissions from you and then you just sent them a bunch of Filmation Ghostbusters stuff. Be a good April Fool's joke.
Why am I with this gorilla? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I admire the fact that you're out there as an active member of sort of Ghostbusters fan discourse, you know, and a good member of it. That's what I'm getting at, I guess. Is that,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, even if I wasn't doing the art, I would still be there.
Right. But the fact that like that's commendable at first to begin with, like you're a good fan. Way to go. Right? Like you're a good, awesome, inclusive on Santa's good no badges. We are opposed to Ghostbusters badges on this show and believe it is the worst thing that Spirit Halloween has ever created.
God. Yeah.
The ghost badge.
Yes.
And once again, to those of you who wear ghost badges, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I feel like even IDW took a shot at that.
Yeah, I was like, don't make Ghostbusters cops. You know, like we have enough problems with like policing and police culture in our world that I don't need to add that political scenario to my ghostbusting enjoyment. just leave the cops out of ghostbusting. Just
very awkward. Like, I know Dan's a sheriff and all that sort of stuff, but like, I don't think Ray would be.
Yeah, I don't either. I definitely don't think Venkman would be given a badge to do much of anything.
No, he should not give him authority or any type of power.
If you gave him authority, it might actually cause him to go insane because he might have to just fight himself.
Yeah. Well, that was my big issue with The Return. I don't know if you read The Return. The Shelley Fish novel Where
I know.
Venkman
Yeah, I don't think I ever made it all the way through that.
But like Venkman running for mayor, why? That man does not want any more red tape. Why would he do that?
No, like it makes no sense. It never made sense to me that was like a plot point. Is like Venkman's campaigning to be the mayor of New York City. What's the end goal of that? Like,
yeah, like
if he was, it would just be so he could try to sleep with more women based off of how he's portrayed at the beginning of the first Ghostbusters movie.
Yeah,
so
it's just, ugh.
Yeah, that would be weird. Again, this is one of those moments where I point out oddities about Peter Venkman and then remind everybody that I'm Jim Maritato, aka Venkmaniac, on the internet.
I showed Ghostbusters to a friend for the first time last night, and there were moments where I was just like, "Ooh, is this gonna go down well?"
Right.
Things have changed.
The Thorazine scene, the whole "let's see if we can try and sleep with co-eds" part. These are things that have just not aged well. So
don't do that.
There's probably at some point like a bonus episode of Extraplasm that's just called Peter Venkman is a Bad Man. And
yeah, just do a supercut.
Just 2 hours of,
there you go.
Right. There's 2 hours of all the things that Peter Venkman does over the course of the entire Ghostbusters franchise that maybe are potentially dubious and make him not such a great guy. And when people go, why are you a Venkmaniac then? Because Spengler Maniac is way longer.
Yeah.
And doesn't have a pun to it. So, I would have to be like Spenglerific or, I don't know, Spengleronis. I don't know.
Outstancing or something.
Outstancing. Oh, that's brilliant. I love it. That's great.
You could be the Zach Morris's Bad of Ghostbusters.
Wow, that's actually could be a thing. If I don't make that, somebody's gonna.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said it. Damn, I should do that.
You should have kept that. That should be yours. You better get to work on video production now.
Damn.
Pete Venkman is bad. Oh, that's a really fun idea. I don't know if Ghost Corps would think it was a really fun idea.
No, I think they try and smooth that over. Oh, you married her. It's fine.
Next Ghostbusters. That's where Peter Venkman, where Bill Murray finally gets his wish, and Peter Venkman is killed off in a Ghostbusters movie. They're like, all right, we got a liability issue now. What do we do?
Yeah.
Well, make him a ghost. Get rid of him.
The optics ain't great. Put him under a bus.
Funny. That's funny. Oh boy. Well, I want to make sure I do want to talk about Spirits Unleashed with you for a few minutes, if that's cool.
Yeah, sure.
But I do want to sort of make sure that we talk about, where your stuff is before we forget to talk about it. We'll plug it at the end, I'm sure, again, too. But people can find your Instagram and stuff. You're Richi Crypt, RICHICRYPT, right?
That's it.
Instagram and on X, right? You're still there, I think.
Yeah, still on X. Not sure for how long, but we'll see.
Yeah, we all feel that way, don't we? We're all like, I don't know if I'm going to be moving out of this place, maybe moving on to somewhere else, or just hunkering down the other places I exist. But how do they find you on Discord? Because people should go check out that October stuff.
So the Discord server is a public server, so you should be able to search it. You should be able to type in Richi Crypt's Art Dojo. I think that's what it's called. Oh, Crypt's Art Dojo. That. Yeah. So you should be able to find it that way. If not, if you find me on Instagram or Twitter or anything, there is a link tree, and the link is in there. So you can just click on that and get straight to it.
I feel old when I talk about Discord because even though I use it, I ask weird questions like, how do you find a Discord? Because I'm always invited to them, right? So it's like, I tell somebody else how to get to it. How do they get there? But yeah, the easiest way to probably get there is go to linktr.ee/Richi Crypt, because that's
I have everything on there.
Yeah. So, and I suggest people go do that because you have some really great stories that you're telling over there. And the other thing I have to say about your Discord that's very cool, you don't just have your stuff over there. You've created and cultivated a space for discussion of all kinds of Ghostbusters related stuff. It's a whole community of, people talking about different topics. You've got sections on Spirits Unleashed. And I love the fact that you essentially have provided a forum for other artists to share their stuff too.
Well, yeah, because that's where I came up.
Right. And that's, I think, is really cool is you've cultivated a space for other artists to kind of network and to get their stuff seen. So it's when you go into your Discord, you look around and you've got other stuff in there, like an art channel that has some of your art in it, but then it's also got stuff that other people have been working on and kind of promoting and publishing. So it's a really cool thing. If you're an artist in the Ghostbusters community and you want a good forum to be able to go and like share your work with other artists, like go and take a look at Richi's Discord, because like that seems to be a great place to find like-minded folks who are working on very similar stuff. And who are have a pretty respectful like set of norms. Like it doesn't seem like you're cultivating a group of people over there who are like, oh, this is where I come to go find what I'm going to go and crop and put in my Instagram posts and claim as mine.
Yeah, no, I don't stand for that. It's kind of like, it was a thing when I was in the band that you didn't steal riffs.
Right.
Or if you did it in a way that no one would notice. So like if I ever see that stuff, I'm like, no, I'm not standing for that. You're going to get a swift kick.
I think it's cool that you're creating that creative space for people to collab and kind of, get to know each other. It's like throwing punk shows, right? Like
that's kind of the mentality I want,
Yeah. You got to get all the other bands in your neighborhood or the other bands in your city to kind of come along and have a good showcase. If you're going to do, a random punk show at a bar, or if you're going to go on tour, you need to get enough other smaller acts who you can kind of come along with along the way to figure out how to put together shows. Right. And so it's really neat. And I think it's kind of unique. I don't really know, like there's things like deviant art that are out there that are much more broad, but this is far more intimate and kind of just a cool space,
That's the thing. It's like, and there's stuff on there as well. Even if you're not good at art, but you want to get good at art, there's places on there where you can go and you can post like art that you think sucks. And there's so many professional artists in there. Like, I'm not going to name drop, but like some of them joined today and I was like, whoa, okay, cool. But like, they're going to reach out and they're going to help you. And they're going to say, you need to do this. If it's not me, it'll be someone else. And that's kind of like, that's what happened in the punk scene as well. It's like, well, your drums sound bad. If you do this, it's going to sound better. And and a rising tide raises all ships. Yeah. That's kind of like how I live.
It reminds me of my friends growing up. They were folks who like started out recording things on 4-track recorders in their bedrooms. And over time, they would trade tapes with each other, and then one guy would go, oh, hey, you know what you could do to make that sound better is you could change the way you're mixing things. And then that guy goes off and becomes Pro Tools engineer who's trained and says, hey, I have access to a studio as a Pro Tools setup. Do you want to come over and maybe do a demo? And over time, all of these people who I knew who were making music either, increased their skills as musicians and increased their reach and became far more better at what they were doing, or even it was just the guy who was doing the engineering work, who was mixing. He went from being a guy who was using 4-tracks to trying to make a recording studio in his parents' basement in the 1990s using bad equipment and Windows 95 to, a Pro Tools setup to now, hilariously, GarageBand, what we need Pro Tools for. But like the funny part to me about that is it's all people who were willing to not be competitive with each other about my band is better than yours. But instead, people who are willing to be like, hey, if we all came together and figured out how to pool resources, if we all can share one drum set for this show, it means that we don't have to change it out. We can get more bands in, whatever it is, right? Like it's that kind of stuff. And so I really admire that. I think it's really cool what you're doing with it. And that's why I really want people to go check it out.
You bringing that up, that reminds me of something that a lot of people don't think that way. And the amount of conversations I've had with people who are like, oh man, John Jakarba's ripping you off. I'm like, no, he's not. He's my friend. We probably, it's like, I don't feel that at all. And I know John doesn't. And it's the same, like, oh, people feel like that we have to be competitive and warring with each other. And it's like, no, I love Badoochi and I love John. And, that October, oh my God, like anything I've done has been blown out of the water by those guys. So it's just like, whoa, I wasn't expecting an OVA and I am still screaming from the rooftops about it. It's so good.
Yeah. John's October project kind of came out a little bit differently than he expected, because I'm not sure if you heard the episode where he was on here a few weeks ago. His computer just literally 5 minutes into the podcast, it just went, I will do no longer. I'm done. I refuse to do anything. And all of his art, everything was on it. And so the fact that you're seeing everything he's putting out now, is still amazing because he lost access to so much for a whole bunch of time. Like he couldn't get at his art. It was just which is had me
people still
infuriating.
have not seen it. Like you need to see that.
Yeah, go check out John
people
Yucapa's stuff.
from Ghost Corps or whoever's doing stuff now see that and go, okay, people like this. We should, I mean, they've reached out to him before with t-shirts and that sort of stuff for Afterlife, but like, the fandom is here. We're making stuff, and if they don't want to make stuff, we're just going to make it anyway. So
right.
Like,
that seems to be the DIY ethos at this point. Is like we would like to see the things we want to see. If you can't seem to make them, then we just make them. Like, and that's
we'll do
and so far it's been kind of a productive dynamic. I'm always worried about like, will anyone get in trouble for the things they're making or creating, and will we always have friendly folks at the inside that proverbial fake firehouse, or could we potentially get more litigious folks who sit at desks in that firehouse? But for now, things
it's
seem
certainly
good.
something I've worried about. I mean, they've always been sort of like very, very nice to me when the brief times we've spoken. But like, I know that Ghost Corps and Sony don't make comics, but Dark Horse does.
Right.
So when that comes out, will they suddenly be like, hang on, you can't be doing all these things that we can't do?
Right.
It could happen. We don't know.
Could happen.
We'll see.
It could, but I'm going to wait until I actually see a Dark Horse book before I worry about it.
Same. I saw that art they put out and I was like, okay, here we go. We're rolling, and nothing yet. So
nothing yet. So, that's why I feel like this year, like 2023 is the year of the Ghostbusters video games. It's just like by the end of the year, it's like we are Spirits Unleashing. We got the VR thing coming. It's going to be exciting. So this is probably a good point for us to kind of talk about Spirits Unleashed, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
You've been into this game since it came out. I know that you have been one of the people who I've seen out there, like in the Spirits Unleashed Discord at certain points, in a League Discord at one point. This is something that I've seen you champion since it came out. And I know a lot of people who've played it. I play it regularly, like it's a daily affair for me, and I admit it. Somebody recently said, how many hours of that do you actually played? They were like, people were screenshotting like, oh, I have this many. And I like highlighted my little box in Epic Games, and it was something like, I don't know, like 1,000 hours. I was like, oh God.
Yeah. I'm fast approaching 2K. So I mean,
it's probably getting closer to that for me and I probably need to touch more grass, but, I really enjoy this game. I also have admittedly had love-hate moments with this game.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But I'm really digging the new DLC. I wonder what you thought about it, because the new downloadable content really is changing this game after a year in ways that I think are good.
It is like a whole new game. Yeah, it's fantastic. And it's a whole new sort of step, because of course I recommend this game to people, and then they come to buy my stream and watch me play it, and I'm going up against like level 500 people, and it's like chaotic, and they can't tell what's going on. And meanwhile, I'm going, yeah, no, it's pretty chill. It's a pretty chill time. You should get in. It's fun, and it's not when people see it. But this takes away that barrier now. You're not going to go online and get stomped by somebody who's been playing 2,000 hours. You can, warm up against bots and still feel like a Ghostbuster.
Right. Yeah. I think
ultimately what this game is about is feeling like a Ghostbuster. And it definitely achieves that.
Well, for me, sometimes it's about feeling like a ghost, I admit.
Yes. Yeah. It's so much fun.
It is so much fun. And it forces you to think about the maps and everything a little bit differently to try and outsmart the Ghostbusters and kind of hide in different places. And
I will straight up get on that microphone and tell them I'm in a room that I'm not. And watch them all run to the theater on the boat. And I'm like, yep, no, he's in the theater. I need help.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works.
I have to say that I've probably at certain points been a person who played music over TeamSpeak. And at one point, I might have figured out that a dirty trick to use was to just adjust my volume on the music on my PC, because that way it made it seem like the ghost was further away from you.
Yeah, because it's all like, it's like he's not here.
Like all the TeamSpeak is proximity based. So if you could just dial down your volume as you're talking, then it makes the person think they got further away from you.
This is sneaky strats that you're getting. This is not your standard play style.
No, this is not. This is some. I just tricked you. I mind gamed you. And this is the kind of stuff that playing as a ghost for too long causes you to do. You're like, well, I've run out of all the ways that I can utilize starfish in this environment. What should I do next?
Although, have you played Samhain yet?
I have, and he can't possess anything, so that changes the dynamic.
No, it's very tricky. But you can set starfish to be homing bombs.
Yes.
So you
yes.
can just launch them at people, which is a lot of fun.
For folks who have been playing this game, the big changes here, if you haven't seen this already in the DLC adds 2 new maps, which bravo to Ilphonic, because typically the thing is like, we get 1 new map, we play through it like 10 times, and like, okay, I guess I'll wait for the next DLC. Because you've like, all right, I've seen the map. But 2 new maps, additional story that was added to the game, which I figured it would just be like, oh, they're going to do like some Samhain voice thing, and it'll be like Kat and Eddie like talking to them. No, they got Ernie Hudson back in. They got Dan Aykroyd back in. They actually like had more story to tell us with our characters that we love doing the actual dialogue, and they connected it all back to the first like story from last year, such that it didn't feel like, oh, it's a different episode, but like, no, this makes the entire game feel like it's growing as an ecosystem, as a story, as opposed to just like, oh, here's a little episodic thing that's entirely different from last year's, right? And so, and beyond that, there's just like, there's character slots now. One of my biggest gripes about this game for the whole time has been like, you can't save your character. So if you wanted to make modifications to your customizations or something, you just lose whatever you've got. Now you got 4 slots. I mean, there's just so many great things they added to this that I'm excited about.
Yeah, and it does feel like a whole new game.
What do you think? Look, what's the best thing about the DLC for you? Because I'm sitting here stealing all of the things and talking about how I love them all.
No, it's great. The story is great. There's some lovely Easter eggs down in that sub basement that I really enjoyed seeing, and was kind of like, there you go. That's what you all asked for so much and cried about for so long, and it's finally there. So shut up. And it's just so much fun to walk through your firehouse now and see Eduardo. I've got like the Extreme Ghostbusters as my sort of like other characters. Just see him hanging out. Just see him slacking off when he should be sweeping. And, you know, that's so much fun. It really brings it up. Because ultimately, when I play it, and me and my crew, it will just turn into us talking about Ghostbusters.
Right.
And we will all just end up hanging out in the firehouse talking about Ghostbusters for hours. The firehouse is like an interactive chat room. It's like that Sony whatever thing it did on the PS3 when the Ghostbusters game came out. Do you remember that?
I didn't have a PS3, so I never saw that. I was a PC player of that game, which means I never had an online experience.
Really?
Yeah, which is part of why I think that's part of why I love Spirits Unleashed so much, is because I could play Ghostbusters the video game by myself and I loved that game, but as a PC gamer, we never got the multiplayer that everybody else got on console. So I never got to do any of the like, let's team up and go bust ghosts. And so for me, like Spirits Unleashed is really the first opportunity I've ever had to do that at home. You know,
you've
like,
never had Dan Aykroyd scream at you about his breadbasket repeatedly.
No,
I've heard
him yell about other things like meddlesome little yarpers, but that's, you know, that's a thing that's in the storyline. But I think that's part of the reason I dig the game so much, is that it's, and in some ways, like, I think that if I had played the original one, the multiplayer, I might have more negative views of the game, because I think some people are like, it's not like the old game, and I'm like, no, it's not. But I couldn't play anything online before, so this is like my first opportunity. Really, I don't even do other online gaming. Like, there's no other games that I'm like, oh, are you a Call of Duty person? Are you? No, I don't play Fortnite. I don't play any of these other games. But you gave me the opportunity to bust ghosts from my house, so sure.
Yeah, it's like when people come in the stream and be like, oh, what do you stream? And I'm like, Ghostbusters.
Right.
And they're like, which one? I'm like, all of them. I have a redeem where if you spend like 5,000 stream points, I will play the Master System version. Just to torment you with that lovely 8-bit rendition that repeats.
Hey, if you do that now, you can play the new version, though, that has Winston in it. There's
yes.
that,
Oh no,
that
the
ROM
Master
hack.
System version was before that. It was
Right.
like the David Crane one. But yeah, the Mega Drive version.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
That's or the Genesis version. Sorry, we call it Mega Drive here.
Oh, yeah. I knew what you meant, but I was thinking when you said, I don't know why I thought the Master System one, I got it confused with the Sega Genesis one. But what you're talking about, the David Crane one, is the one that was out for the NES. It was also out for the Atari. So it was like they made several different ports of that. That's the one for folks who were like, what are you talking about? The Zool building game, everybody. The game with the Zool building.
The Master System version is like the definitive version of that game.
Oh, yes, it is. It's way better.
So much better.
Yep.
But,
it's like a far better version of that. But that's funny though, because it's like that's a context that many of us didn't play that. Master System wasn't huge in the US. It was far bigger in Europe.
I guess not. Yeah, it was NES, wasn't it? Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of funny. It's similarly, it's like, you never really had the chance or you had the chance to play Famicom or NES games, sure, right? But like, we never had the chance to play this other game. So for us, getting, Ghostbusters 2 for the NES, which was terrible, was such a big deal.
The thing is, the NES didn't hit here until late 1989, 1990.
Yeah. Right.
So, and you couldn't go into Toys R Us and buy it. You had to go into Boots, which was a drugstore.
Right.
And like spend £300, which in 1990 money was stupid.
Right.
And no one got it. No one had it. None of my friends had it as a kid. We were Sega kids. Yeah. And I didn't pick one up until sort of like much later when they were at boot sales or yard sales or that sort of thing. So yeah. But I mean, I've got it now, and I've got like all the European exclusive HAL Labs, Ghostbusters 2, all that sort of stuff.
That's the best game for it.
That is so much fun.
But I think it's kind of funny generationally. It's kind of like I didn't have that online gaming experience on the PS3, and so the way I view Spirits Unleashed is way different. For those of you like growing up with the Master System game is like your predominant thing. Your view of Ghostbusters games has to be like entirely different when you start interacting with the other ones. It's just. I don't know. It's kind of fun to think about, but I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about what they're doing with the story in this game? Like we can with this. Let's be fair for a second. We'll probably drop some spoilers in here about the story of the video game. For folks who are gonna, if you're listening to this and you're really worried about having the video game story spoiled for you, like maybe fast forward through this section. But I'm okay with talking about it.
I think Jason's got it up on GB News if you want to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why I'm okay with talking about it, because generally IllFonic takes the story and they just put it up on YouTube. They did last time too, because I think they know that as soon as the game gets reviewed by anybody, they're going to post a review of this. Yeah. They're going to post the story.
If they don't do it, someone's going to do it.
Yeah. So if you don't want to know, if you're like, I'm spoiler free on video games and movies, then be cautious about the next few minutes. But what do you think about what they're doing with this story? Like what they did to kind of take the last episode and bring it into this one?
I think it's great because sort of like it kind of just embraces Ghostbusters. Like not even because when the game first came out, I was kind of, well, that doesn't work because that doesn't work with the lore and that's not how that equipment works and blah, blah. And as the game's gone on and all these extra DLCs come out and all these extra plugins, it's like, well, it doesn't matter now because you can have real Ghostbusters interact with 2016 and all this kind of crazy stuff. So to just have them go, okay, Sam Hain's here. He was in the real Ghostbusters, we know, the movie Ghostbusters never fought him, but it doesn't matter because it's fun. And that I love that. And I feel like that Sam Hain class where you don't have to worry about possessing stuff and, well, you do possess stuff, but you don't go into the items and it doesn't turn into like a prop hunt type of game. I feel like that archetype of a character, if you want to do DLC, you want to do paid DLC and give me a boogeyman, you can just like have it as a skin. That works with that character, right? Yeah. You can now do so much. I mean, IllFonic, I know, they're not lazy. I don't think they will do that, but they could. I'm just excited, so excited about it. I want to be playing it now.
I think that what they've done is good because Bug-Eye Ghost kind of brought us like a ghost that was not real Ghostbusters-ish, but it was like a toy from our childhoods, right? So it was like, and it's kind of like the same way he was an Easter egg in Afterlife. You could have argued that he was in the video game because he's in Afterlife and the video game takes place after Afterlife, which is why Munter's in the video game, etc. But by doing this, by kind of going back to stuff from the narrative canon from the cartoons, it does open up like such a vast world of different potential ghosts or different trap mechanisms and other things that can be done. And by trap mechanisms, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about out there's these ways for you to summon ghosts who then like can either mob the Ghostbusters while you run away or as a ghost, or like mini ghosts who can hop on a Ghostbuster's head and essentially like try to suffocate them by like sitting on top of their head and sliming them to death until you get them off. Or the most recent one is that Samhain has the ability to create a glowing orb and suspend a Ghostbuster or a civilian in the air. So they're just like flailing in the air until they can try and break the bubble to get out. Right. And so by creating all these new mechanisms, they're really extending out the gameplay. Like, I think that the problem that a lot of us had was like, we felt like the gameplay was getting repetitive, and this changes that so much because it now is like a character, a ghost that plays entirely differently, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And like, I feel like a lot of people in the community were complaining about the run meta, which for those that don't know is like, you could basically fight a ghost until the very last rift was gone, and the ghost would be like, see ya, and jump into a tiny object and just hide or run away the entire time. Where Samhain can't do that, and he has to go toe to toe with you. That's like a whole new skill ceiling that the kids hopefully are going to want to be like, well, I want to be good with this guy. I have to get good at fighting and holding my own against these Ghostbusters.
Right.
And yeah, so like it's changed the game completely.
Yeah, I'm super stoked about it. And I know that I will say this. I know at certain points in this podcast, I have been, I don't know, just a tad critical about this game. I've been a little bit, at points like, I love this game, but here's everything that's wrong with it. And I have to say that I walked away from my first night with the new DLC and I was thrilled. My only complaint was I had a couple crashes on my system, but one of them was totally because I turned on HDR, and apparently that pushes too much power through my GPU and then causes my power supply to go click and turn off. And I went, apparently we need a new power supply. We're exceeding capacity here. This computer is completely inadequate for our power needs, and the neighborhood's like a demilitarized zone. But I think, but beyond that, it's like I've had a couple random, I crashed, or I got dropped out to the menu for some reason they'll get fixed. Those will be quality of life things that'll get fixed pretty quickly. But what I was so excited about is that this was probably the first DLC I felt like I got that didn't get accompanied by a game-breaking glitch. Like everything that I've been complaining about as game-breaking glitches suddenly was fixed, and I went, this is the game I've been waiting for like a year.
Yeah, which kind of worries me a little bit because, like, is that the sign that this is the end? Because they were like, you're going to get 4 DLCs. They never said anything after that. I think that there'll still be content that will get us through the next movie. I think there's a hint. So. There's a hint in the storyline that people have been kind of talking about that if you pay attention to what Dan Aykroyd's character, Ray Stantz, that's his. This is what happens to me. Dan Aykroyd and Ray Stantz. Who is Dan Aykroyd? Dan Aykroyd and Ray Stantz have combined into one human being for me at this point in my life, named like Dan Stantzroyd. But so when Dan Stantzroyd is talking, yes, you can do your Dan Stantzroids. Oh God. Oh boy, we just went there, didn't we? Yep. When in the storyline, when his character says that he has that there's going to be an intern arriving soon, right? It's the end of the mission. Like, you finished the mission, you've defeated Samhain, and in the final moments of this particular story episode, we hear that Ray has an intern who's arriving soon. Right. So to me, I went, that means we're going to get more DLC, and we're going to get more story DLC. We're not just going to get like, here's a ghost, here's a level, but potentially we're going to get more story DLC. And I've seen people suggest like Phoebe's coming, but then somebody else I saw write podcasts coming. And I went, yep. Yeah. I think when he said that, I was like, podcast. Yeah.
It's like, that's going to be podcast comes to the firehouse. It totally makes sense. It won't be Phoebe for whatever reason. Like, we're not going to get the Spangler kids in the video game. That's probably
they do say they do say the Spanglers are coming to visit. So
that's true. Maybe. So like, we're going to get some interpretation of that, but that's the part that I got excited about. Is I went, oh, I've been waiting for more story to this game for a long time. Like, we got an opening 20 minutes or whatever it was, the 20 minutes of gameplay that is functionally story and a tutorial from a year ago. And now what I really want is to be able to add more nuance and depth to this, because when John Urcaba was on the show like last year, we talked about this. He was like, it's kind of like if the real Ghostbusters episodes could be a video game.
Yes.
Right. And then we didn't get any more story for like a year. We didn't get any more story development. We just got like, here's another ghost and here's another level, you know? So I hope we get more story because I think it's good. But
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm all for that, you know. And Ilphonic, if you're listening and you need someone to write it, I'm available. You know, I've said it to them a few times, actually. They've got the comics. They've read them, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I would love to see more people we know kind of get involved with content creation for a video game like that, because the deeper we can go into the lore of Ghostbusters, like the more you can keep that game running. Like there's no shortage of different ghosts. Like I want a toilet ghost. I totally do. Yeah. I want to get like a fearsome flush.
You want a fearsome flush, yeah.
Yeah. Like they could be entirely like a ghost class of plumbing ghosts that all had different like water or sewage based attacks. I'd be fine with that.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I think there's so much you can do with it, and the community is always going to be there because we played. You know, I know people who bought an Xbox 360 to play just Ghostbusters, the video game. We played that game for like 15 years. Right. And people are still playing it. So the community is always going to support it if they do.
I will say this in these terms, like this is a way for me to articulate my viewpoint shift on this game. A while back, I said, as much as I like this game, I don't imagine that there will ever be some remastered edition that we come back to 10 years from now and be like, oh, this was Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, and now I can buy it in a collector's edition box, and that's great. Because even though we would all buy it, because we're all Ghostbusters fans who buy everything that's made into collector's edition.
It's got the logo on it. I have to have it.
My view at the time was just that the game doesn't have sufficient uptake and repeated interaction and content to make it have that nostalgic value to it. And after playing through the DLC and then doing some matches, both playing as Sam Hain and against Sam Hain, I was like, this is finally a thing where I'm like, I feel like it would be a shame if this were to go away. Before it was like, if it were to go away, that would suck, but I also would understand market forces and things. And so I would go, yep, it's just another game like many other licensed games that people ask about whether or not it's dead within 18 months, right? Like, and that's just kind of how it is. And now if you ask me how, like now I'm like, no, like you got it. This is a thing that's really has so much more longevity possibility to it than say a one-off game about, you know, not to be like, because I know these are Ilphonic properties and I'm not trying to pigeonhole them, but it's like there's been complaints about like the Friday the 13th game, like just kind of got done, or like the Evil Dead game just kind of done. And so those things do happen. You watch franchise IPs and arrangements and like licenses fizzle out, and you just see these games that a lot of love and passion for the content creators who are making this stuff just go away. And so I like the new DLC. I'll on the record.
It's amazing. And there is a boss fight map that I love. And I know we were talking about it before we came on, but like more of that. Can you imagine like doing, I keep bringing up the Boogeyman because he's like the easiest sort of like one to kind of like equate to Sam Hain level. But like, can you imagine like the Boogeyman's realm?
Yeah.
Like with like the MC Escher style geometry and everything like that, fighting ghosts in there.
Or what about a boss fight against Sandman where he just keeps putting your Ghostbusters to sleep?
You have to go over and shake him, wake him up.
Yeah. You have to like keep reviving your Ghostbusters because he keeps putting him into a dream realm, and he can't eventually like you start the battle in one place and then you get transported into that dream realm full of all kinds of twisted Ghostbuster stuff, like,
or even like other stuff where it's like a horde mode, just off the top of my head, you can have like a horde mode and be like, oh, there's a leak in the containment unit. We have to go into the containment unit.
Right.
And, do whatever you want to do.
Like, to be fair, they made that suit. That's one of one of the pieces of content they made for us is that like now if you want to put on the suit that Egon wears and Xmas marks the spot when he goes into the containment unit and shows us that it's full of lots and lots of rocks.
How? Well, you could even do the one, I can't remember. I think it is the one where that Get Real was based on, where they go into the containment unit and it's just cables.
Yeah.
And there's like ghosts hanging out among cables. Like, do that. 0G cable land.
Yeah.
I'd play that.
Right. But I mean, that's what I think is so cool is that they illustrated to us that they can do so much more with this engine than we were aware of, I think. Like that, at least that I was aware of. I'll put it in those terms, right? Like
yes, definitely.
I've been thinking about this as, they can create ghost characters that fly around and they all kind of have the same mechanics in flying and movement. And they all each have a special and they each have a unique ability. But, in terms of the physics of the game, there's not really much difference between each of these ghosts other than the different strategies they can employ. Giving us an entirely new class that changes the gameplay for a ghost. They can't possess things, but they can do things like one of the coolest things that he can do that Sam Hain's class, his Overlord class can do is this catalyst thing, right? That he can like essentially create another rift. So if you're a person, like I admit, one of my favorite ways to play right now as a ghost, I don't hide the rifts anymore. I pick them up and I move them around throughout the entire match. So I will put 2 of them in each room that I can because it makes the haunt go up faster and make sure all of the minions come out quick. So you can get to 8 minions real fast if you have 2 rifts open at the same time. So I'll open 2 rifts in a room and then defend both of them, right? And now as Sam Hain, I can open a 4th, right? And so it's like, I looked at that and I went, oh, this totally changes the rift gameplay because now you can have the Ghostbusters working on destroying a rift and they think that they're getting close. And meanwhile, you have a room that's got another rift in it and then you spawn the catalyst and boom, that room is now haunted in 2 seconds. Like it changes the strategy of everything of how you can play as a ghost.
And I feel like they knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Because I saw Albert, who is their community manager. He started when he's been playing. You can watch him on stream. He streams it, I think, every Wednesday for them.
Yeah.
And he will put all 3 rifts in a room, open them up, and he's unstoppable. Because you can't move for drudges, rifts, people get knocked over because now he's playing interference. It's like, doing that with Sam Hain, you're just bullying people at that point. It's like, it's unfair. Especially with a 4th.
What I've found is fun about it, though, is that you can leave a rift behind and then go spawn. They think they've got a rift. They're going to be able to, we got it. We finally fought this rift. We're finally going to blow it up. And you leave them when the rift is like down to 10%. You go to another room and you spawn a catalyst. So they've accomplished nothing, right? And so this will be the balancing issue that people get upset about potentially with Sam Hain about.
I've already seen it. I've already seen people complain.
And it takes, to be fair, it has a 2-minute cooldown time, so it's not like you can do it over and over again. But I was definitely in a match last night against the guy though who had us going for 8 minutes, and he managed to get 3 catalysts out in the match, and I was like, "Oh, this is rough, man. This is something I don't think we're gonna win," and we didn't.
Yeah, no, that's hard work. That is hard work.
But I think it's great. The gameplay is really changing, so.
And plus, like, we're both like in our 40s. So to hear us, and we've seen it all, and I don't know about you, but I'm pretty bitter and jaded. So for me to be like giddy like a kid and be like, Sam Hain, he can put you in a bubble. And like, it's like, I am often a cynic and I have no problem being like, if you listen to last week's episode, people know that I got a little bit sad about Hasbro, right? Like I have my moments of being kind of like, sad about things or sort of seeing the cynicism in things. But the things this week that made me smile like harder than anything else were playing that game and sort of like fighting against Sam Hain and then playing as Sam Hain and doing all this new weird stuff. The other thing I was considering about this is that, and I'm going to go probably do this after you and I are done because it's my new strategy to try out for the day. There's not been a reason to respawn as a different ghost in this game. Yes.
Right? Like, if there has been, it's been, I'm losing as my current ghost. I'm going to try and switch it up. But now there actually is, because you could start the match as, say, Slimer, get caught, respawn as Sam Hain, regenerate your rift, right? Like, or start as him, generate a fourth rift, and then switch to a more agile ghost who can hide inside things, right? Like,
go as Pokey and then just snipe people as they try and get your rift.
Right.
And it's completely changed this game that we all, we've all put thousands of hours in, and we're like, oh yeah, it's great, I'm loving it. And now it's like, I'm excited to play again.
What do you think is your favorite new thing? It doesn't have to be from this DLC, but over the last year, since you've been there since the beginning, what is your favorite thing they've introduced to this game, like overall?
All the real Ghostbusters stuff. Because the fact that we're like, real Ghostbusters ended in 1990.
Yeah.
And, it's like, we're 30 years out and we're getting new real Ghostbusters stuff. We got screaming heroes in this update. Like that to me is like, because I'd kind of gotten to the point with the real Ghostbusters where I was like, oh, okay. Yes, yeah, okay, it's great, it's for kids. The first 2 seasons are great, but everything else, no.
Right.
But like, and now I'm like, oh my God, I love real Ghostbusters. It's completely rekindled everything. So, oh yeah, it's great to go into a game and see 4 Egons. Because that's how you played as a kid. It's like, no, I want to be Egon. No, I'm Egon. So we'll all be Egon. And yeah, it's just like that childhood joy comes back with the real Ghostbusters stuff. And seeing them do it so well, they didn't have to like get that trap to look exactly like it does in the cartoon.
Right.
Because like having recently like studied the real Ghostbusters a lot, and because to do the comic, I've been like going through cells and everything like that. None of that is done with a ruler. That is all done by some Japanese artist who's like just doing it quickly to get it out and get it in on time. So the fact they went in and they fixed that geometry and everything like that shows that there's a genuine love for the franchise.
Yeah,
it's exciting to see, and it's infectious.
I've said this since the very beginning, even when I have been frustrated about things like, a game-breaking trap mechanic or the fact that I can't block people who sometimes harass me until I have to change my screen name and my avatar because I can't safely be Maniac necessarily inside of Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed without getting harassed.
Same. Yeah.
You've been through this too a little bit. You can't be Maniac either.
I can't be Maniac.
But there are those things that I've been frustrated with at points. But the two things that I can say, but without question, I have been so thrilled with the design of this game. Like at every turn, I'm like, every ghost looks great. Like that Slimer looks great. And I've said this a bunch and I'll just keep saying it. That pizza restaurant is phenomenal. I love that pizza restaurant.
God, so much fun.
I love it. I love the new DLC's bowling alley too. Like, and the subway station, as a person who grew up in New York, I'm like, spot on. All that's missing here is the MTA logos. Like, but
when I walked into that laser tag arena on that new map, I could smell the fog machine, like the gunk they used to pour in the fog machines and the laser tag. I was like, oh my God, this is excellent.
Like I have a serious like attaboy to give to like the folks who are doing the production and the artwork and design. I think it's Jarrett Garrettson, I believe, is the person who's like the lead designer on this.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's not just him. I know that there's like, husband and wife team who've done the writing on this. It's Elise Williams, right? Is her name, who's one of the writers on this, I believe is her name. There it goes. It's in my brain somewhere. The work they've done on creating this world is phenomenal. That isn't to put down on the programmers who are working on the mechanics and things, and not like, hey, you guys are the reason why it was bad. I just like that's the part that's you've got to make work. You've got to play test. You got to actually like manipulating code on one end of it ruins something else. And it's
it's the push and pull of design.
Right. And it's different than the character designs and, the artwork stuff. But I have to say throughout all of this, the art style has been something I've so appreciated and thought like rides the line between animated and not. Like it is not photorealistic, but it also doesn't feel like I'm playing a hardline cartoon. If that makes sense. It's it's like a stylized reality in a way, And
I certainly feel like this the whole game kind of rides that tone, right? Because there's stuff in there that, like, if you were an outsider looking, you'd be like, oh, it looks like Ghostbusters Fortnite and it looks very kiddie. Sometimes, yes. But then you get deeper into it and you start reading the articles and realizing there's like stuff about cannibalism in there and like ships full of corpses. And you're like, whoa, this is a lot. You know, it kind of does that Ghostbusters tone very well. And I commend them.
And at a design level, there's just such attention to detail. Like, that's what that pizza restaurant, the reason I keep coming back to it is that, like, I'm pizza obsessed. Everybody who knows, listens to this podcast knows that, like, I make my own pizza dough from scratch, like in cold fermented dough for 3 days. And like, I'm a nut job when it comes to pizza. That's what I did with the pandemic. I went, I can't get New York style pizza in California. I'm a New Yorker. This has to be somewhere inside of me. Let's find it. And so I went off to YouTube to teach myself how to make pizza like a person does in a pizza restaurant in New York. And I have this crazed appreciation for all kinds of pizza making tools and pizza ovens and weird stuff now. When I go to a pizza restaurant, I'm like noticing what they're using. And to look at that design of that level when they did it in the last DLC, I went, someone did a lot of reference work. Like somebody sat down and was like, what is in a pizza kitchen anyway? Like, what are the things that have to be in there? What does an oven have to look like? Where would you hang the pizza peels? Right? It's just like, and I just looked at it and went, how much reference work is going into designing our environments, right? So,
which you don't even think about. And if you look at the game, there's like 3 different versions of that as the haunt grows.
Yeah.
Because like you go into it at first and the pizza ovens are off and everyone's fine. You go into it a little bit later on when the haunt's picked up and it's like, you know, it's a completely different vibe, but it's slightly slimy. It's okay. You go in there when the haunt is full and it's like you've got hellfire coming out of the ovens. It's like the lighting has completely changed. And it's fantastic. So much work into it. Went into
and
it.
It's like, yeah.
Nobody talks about that.
No, that's like, I mean, that's the part where like we talk about, oh, this isn't working. This is broken. This is like, this is unfair. Who's cheating? Like that's what gets talked about in like and this is not to put down on the Spirits Unleashed Discord or the League Discord or anybody else's Discord, but like that is a lot of the content. Like if you go into the GBSUL Discord, there's somebody there every day going, someone was cheating. Someone broke out of the trap twice. And that means that they're using secret codes and they have nuclear weapons and they should be banned from the game. And you're like, or the game just has some glitches over the last year because things are glitchy and they're being worked out. And that's what I'm so excited about. Those mechanics are kind of taken care of. But that's not what you hear talked about. What you don't hear talked about is that the labor of love that was put into, you know, making sure that the carpet looked like something authentic from in the laser tag environments, right? Or that it's just like, that's the stuff that or the bowling alley section of that level blew my mind, right? It was just like, oh my God, I feel like I walked into some sort of like glow bowling complex in like Boston or something that I've been to. It was just like, yeah. And to be fair, like the Queen Mary is basically the basis for that cruise ship level, right? That's the ship that's in Long Beach, California.
I didn't know it was as accurate as it was until Ellie, who is on the new Slay Puff, was like, no, I've been there. Here's a photo of me on that. I was like, wow, that is just the level. Right.
Because that's a game player Californian Ellie would track because the Queen Mary is here in California because I've seen it. And when I went to the, I was like, oh God, we're inside of a real boat. This is weird.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah. Shout out to Californian Ellie, who I've encountered in Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed before.
Yeah. She's a doll. She's great. She's leading the new Slay Puffed. So.
That's awesome. Congratulations to them because I think they just won the 3rd season of that
season 3. That's the 2nd season that Slay Puffed have won.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know the current status of the Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed League, but I know that the last season of it that happened was they were the winning team. So congrats. Yeah. But
you can also buy Slay Puff stickers in the shop.
There you go. Like so. So what do you hope for next? I guess like that's a way to sort of put a pin in our discussion about Spirits Unleashed. Maybe is what are you looking for them to do next? We said maybe like Boogeyman, right, as a ghost, but what else could you want out of Spirits Unleashed that you don't have now, other than Boogeyman and say a boss battle?
Darts.
They've
spoken about it like darts was supposed to be you were supposed to be able to play darts in the firehouse. It was supposed to ship with the game, and it never happened.
I've never heard this.
Really? They were talking about it on one of the streams. And I was like, that's what I want. I want darts. I want Jump Ghost. I want that pinball machine to be... Because, like, there's assets in there for it. It looks like it's all going to move. Like... And as I said earlier, it usually descends into just a chat room where we hang out and talk about Ghostbusters. So if I can play pinball while I'm complaining about whatever I'm complaining about that week in Ghostbusters, then that's what I want. Somewhere I can actually just hang out. If I could film a podcast in that firehouse where we're all sitting in chairs and like... That's what I want. I don't know.
You're like, make the firehouse Second Life. Right,
yeah, that's what I want. Let me role play in there.
I love that.
Let me keep a high score on Jump Ghost and let me, you know.
I got really excited because one of the video games, one of those arcade machines became something you could interact with in the last DLC. But when it turns out that all it's in it is like high scores for some other game. And I was like, oh, that's like, that sucks.
The high scores for the Arcade-ageddon. Yeah, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, finally. You know.
I want them to work out the license rights to get me Q*bert. As I really want Q*bert, because the Q*bert is not in the original Firehouse from the movie, but it is in the Ghostbusters video game Firehouse. Like,
well, it was supposed to be playable in that, wasn't it? But
I think so.
They just ran out of time.
Right. So I'm like, give me Q*bert. But yeah, I'm also wondering if we will start to see like real world advertising in that game. Like, remember how the original, like, I wouldn't surprise me at a revenue generator, but like the original Ghostbusters game had like Doritos in it. Right.
Yeah.
And then when they did the remastered, they had to replace all that artwork with like generic chip bags or something.
Yeah, and they had to remodel Ecto-1 and this like very subtle things that I was like, oh, I didn't realize that until somebody made a mod that reverts it all.
Right.
So I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that had changed. That's cool.
But that's what tells you, that's what shows you all that attention to detail that exists. And I like that, like, when my question for you is like, what major thing do you want to see? And you're like, give me more ghostbusting around the firehouse. Give me more nuance and detail and like a little experience that I can have, as opposed to I even need another massive level or a new feature or a new this, etc. But I do like the idea. I think going inside the containment unit like that, that's attributable to you. That's your idea.
Thank you.
I like that idea. That's something I would love to see. So, well, anything else? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, which is like something you could totally do in that world now. Because like the way I write the containment unit is kind of like in line with the stuff in the movies, where it's kind of boring and it's probably just a bunch of capacitors behind a wall. But like in Spirits Unleashed and the real Ghostbusters, it's this whole other dimension. Like, do that. Why not? Yeah, it
would be great. I would love
to
see
it. We've got a portal in the sub basement now. Let me use it as a Stargate. Send it to some other dimensions.
Yeah, just don't turn on the HDR first, because you might blow out your PSU as soon as Sam Hain shows up. That's exactly what had happened.
Really?
Yeah,
damn.
I was doing the narrative. And Sam Hain appeared, and he was like about to consume Nameless's, soul out of the bottle, and he had his hands out, and all of a sudden my computer just went click and turned off, and I was like, oh, he broke my computer.
My power supply.
There's a paranormal event in my office.
Oh no. Oh man. Yes. That would be awesome.
This has been a lot of fun to chat with you, Richie. Is there anything else that you want to share with folks? Anything else that they should go check out? Obviously they should go check out Richi Crypt on Instagram, on X.
Yeah.
They should go check out the Discord via the link tree. Anything else you want to tell people out there to be aware of or know about, etc.?
But it's the real Ghostbusters coming on the Discord. I'm hopefully going to be able to get that printed and have that as a physical thing that people can buy. But we'll see. There's lots of moving parts with that kind of stuff. And yeah, just keep an eye on that. There will be the issue 4 is in the works of Something Strange. And it's going to touch on stuff that we've only sort of tangentially heard of in Ghostbusters, but is a very big part of the world because of that.
Right.
So that's going to be fun. Some new stuff that the Ghostbusters have to go against. And yeah, it's all coming. Just, stick with me.
Well, I did not provide a lot of spoilers about your stories because I want everyone to go check them out. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
At a certain point when you're done with October, I will pick your brain about different things in your story that I liked and thought were cool, other than the fact that there's a really fun alarm clock scene that really tickled my funny bone, and is worth the price of free admission alone, everybody. So,
Yes.
you know, but I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and everything you do out there. I appreciate all the work you've done for like people for commissions and things. Is that still a thing that are you still doing commissions if people want to do that?
I'm still doing commissions. Yeah, the commission that never ends. I always say that like I want everyone to have the chance to be a Ghostbuster. I keep the prices low for that reason. Hit me up. I will get back to you at some point. October is a nightmare for Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters stuff. But yeah, I will get back to people eventually.
If you're out there and you want to get a Ghostbusters portrait of yourself done by an amazing artist who has a huge love of Ghostbusters and will put all the attention to detail that you could possibly hope into it, you should absolutely reach out to Richi because he does amazing work. And you probably know someone who has a portrait that he did. If you don't, you can probably find them pretty quickly by going to the internet and asking, does anybody have a Richi Crypt portrait? And 15 people will be like, oh my God, let me show you this. It's awesome. He did me and my cat.
Yeah.
I got one of those this week. Shout out to Ectosoul SC, Steven, who passed that along. So,
oh, nice.
But anyway, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It was a lot of fun to talk with you and to finally sort of get to know each other a little better one-on-one.
Yeah, man.
And please come back and visit us again soon. Anytime you got something you want to talk about, you've a project you're working on, know that you can certainly come on back and let us know. So,
thank you for having me. It's been great time.
Yeah, thank you again, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, catch you later.
Take care. That about wraps things up for Extraplasm this week. I want to say thank you one more time to Richi Crypt for coming on the show, and especially for making the time to do the show despite the great distance and time difference between the two of us. It's always a bit of a challenge to schedule an episode of Extraplasm because folks are in different places in different contexts, and sometimes we're in different time zones. When we schedule something internationally, it's always the biggest challenge because of how far apart we are and how different the time is, such that one of us is experiencing daytime and one of us is experiencing nighttime. And so, Richi, thank you so much for being flexible and staying up late to help record an episode for everybody to hear this week. I also want to encourage you out there listening that if you have not gone and taken a look at Richi Crypt's artwork before, to go over to his link tree to access all of his stuff. You can do so by opening your web browser and going to linktr.ee/Richi Crypt, RICHICRYPT. That'll give you access to his Discord, his Redbubble store, his Etsy store, his Instagram and YouTube pages, his Twitch account. Every place that you could potentially find Richi, you'll find via his link tree. Please go support him. He came out to help support Extraplasm this week. Beyond that, I want to say thank you as usual to Brendan Pearce of Badoochi Studios, who provides our logo and visual identity for the podcast and has done so for the last year. Brendan, you're awesome. And you still have the best sculpted Slimer out there. Don't let Star Ace take nothing from you. I also want to thank Vaporwave artist MAGNAVOX, whose version of Ghostbusters serves as our theme song each week. And of course, I need to thank you for listening. Thanks for being awesome supporters of Extraplasm and for tuning in each week. If you have something you want to share with the podcast, something you want to tell me because you're totally stoked and hyped up about what's coming out with the next Ghostbusters products from Hasbro or whatever it is that you want to talk about, reach out to me at extraplaspmpodcast@gmail.com or on Instagram or X at Extraplasm. And of course, you can now find the podcast on YouTube, Extraplasm Podcast, as well as on Facebook. So feel free to go and find me in any of those platforms if you want to share something with the podcast, especially if you have an event coming up or if you're in a franchise and you have something you want to help promote. That's what Extraplasm is here to do. It's to help the people in the franchise get heard and to tell their stories. So if that's you, don't hesitate to reach out. The next time you hear from the podcast will actually be Halloween. So until then, watch out for spooks, be safe, and as Ernie Hudson reminds us every week,
Try to have fun and always keep on busting. Take care.